Chapter 897. Seeing the latter reveal such an expression, President Fan's expression was once again stunned. After muttering to himself for a moment, he exchanged glances with the two vice presidents beside him. After pondering for a while, he could not help but feel astonished. Qin Yun's words were not wrong. A few days ago, he had indeed been unusually close to Xiao Yan. This was something that everyone in Golden Glory City had seen. As for the three guards beside him, they were indeed as he had said. Without his orders, they would definitely not leave him even half a step. However, looking at the current situation, the three of them had surrounded Xiao Yan. Furthermore, from their appearance, it was clear that they had just gone through a struggle. Furthermore, looking at their positions, it seemed that they had the intention of stopping Xiao Yan. What were they trying to stop? Could it really be that this brat called Xiao Yan was the one who did it? Even Qin Yun has been used to protect him. Xiao Yan, who exactly are you? A series of questions rose in President Fan's heart. The two vice presidents beside him also frowned, especially Qi Ming. In his heart, he felt that they had missed something. However, Qin Yun's words were something that he could not bring himself to say. After all, Xiao Yan had indeed destroyed the formation. This was something that they had witnessed with their own eyes. It was truly difficult for others to shift the blame onto him. However, it was also because of this that Qin Yun's words made Qi Ming even more suspicious. Hiss! Suddenly, President Fan abruptly raised his head as if he had thought of something. Almost at the same time, the two vice presidents behind him also abruptly raised their heads. Their gazes instantly landed on Xiao Yan's body. If this brat is an alchemist, then everything would make sense if he is a member of the Alchemist Alliance. President Fan's face was gloomy as killing intent surged in his eyes. At the same time, the two vice presidents behind him also had the same thought. The Alchemist Alliance and their Array Master Association could be said to be like fire and water. Both parties treated each other as sand in their eyes and wished that they could get rid of the other party as soon as possible. Today, Xiao Yan had taken advantage of their unguarded moment to destroy the formation. This was undoubtedly a declaration of war by the Alchemist Alliance. Damn it! I never imagined that the Alchemist Alliance's methods would actually be so despicable. For the sake of dealing with us, they actually did such a thing. Boss, what should we do now? Let's go and capture that brat. He destroyed our great defensive array. Today, we must make him pay the price. If such a young alchemist dies, I believe it will be a painful blow to them. Behind him, Chang Zhihui and the other vice president also spoke out one after another. One could hear the killing intent in their words. However, I am currently still very curious. The three guards by your side are all elite 9-star Do D. If they were to attack together, would they not be able to finish off a 5-star Do D brat? Don't tell me you did it on purpose? However, at this moment, Qi Ming, who had been silent all this while, suddenly frowned. His eyes narrowed as his gaze locked onto Qin Yun. In a deep voice, he voiced out the doubts in his heart. These words had really hit the nail on the head. The few people beside him appeared to have come to a sudden understanding the moment these words left his mouth. They immediately turned their gazes back to Xiao Yan. At a glance, they could tell that he was indeed only a 5-star Do D from the turbulent Do Chi that had appeared on the surface of his body. 5-star Do D. This brat is actually only a 5-star Do D. The face of Chang Zhihui, who had seen Xiao Yan reveal his aura for the first time, immediately became shocked. His face involuntarily revealed an expression of disbelief. It was no wonder that such a young 5-star Do D would receive Qin Yun's favor. Unfortunately, Qin Yun seemed to have judged the wrong person. Qin Yun, you should give the old me a reasonable explanation for this matter. Otherwise, I am still unable to believe that he is purposely trying to harm you. Chairman Fan's face sank. His voice still contained a rich doubt. Indeed, under normal circumstances, how could a 5-star Do D be a match for a 9-star Do D? Even if he were to face them alone, he would not have any ability to resist, much less face three of them at the same time. Just from this point alone, what Qin Yun had said earlier was a lie. Hence, how could Chairman Fan believe that a 5-star Do D would actually be able to destroy the great city protecting formation under the combined efforts of 3 9-star Do D? It was likely that no one would believe that they had not purposely gone easy on Qin Yun. Once these words were spoken, the gazes of the two people behind him immediately landed on Qin Yun. At this moment, Qin Yun's expression was completely indifferent. The current situation was completely within his expectations. If Chairman Fan is unwilling to believe it, you can ask the other people in this open ground. They are all witnesses to this matter. Qin Yun coldly smiled. It seemed that he was quite dissatisfied with Chairman Fan's doubt. Chairman Fan coldly snorted when he heard this. His gaze swept over the people in the open ground below. The result was as he had expected. Everyone who made contact with his gaze swiftly turned their heads away and acted as though they did not know anything. Regardless of whether it was the Formation Master Association or Qin Yun, these two factions were enormous existences to them. These people present could not afford to offend them. They would naturally consciously act as though they had not seen anything earlier. Qin Yun, there is no need for you to say such useless words. If you still do not have a sufficient reason to convince the old me, you must stay behind today even if the three of them protect you. Chairman Fan coldly cried out. His body trembled slightly and the surging do qi within his body immediately surged out. It was like waves of ripples that rippled around his body. The old face of Yan Hua in front of Qin Yun sank when he saw this. His feet took half a step forward and the aura and pressure that belonged to a 9-star do D spread out at this moment. At the same time, the expressions of Yan He and the other black-robed old man on the other side also changed slightly. They were about to step forward. Wait! At this moment, Qin Yun once again spoke and stabilized these few people. The three of you need not bother about me. All you need to do is block Xiao Yan. You must not let him take the opportunity to escape. Qin Yun coldly cried out, causing Yan He and the other two to be extremely surprised in their hearts. Seeing that Yan Hua did not move, Qin Yun cried out an order. Only then did the latter withdraw and once again surrounded Xiao Yan with the other two. After which, Qin Yun once again turned his gaze around and looked at Chairman Fan. As for Chairman Fan, I know that you do not believe what I have just said. However, if you think that Xiao Yan is really an ordinary 5-star do D, you are very wrong. What do you mean by this? Chairman Fan frowned. He could not help but feel a little suspicious in his heart. Chapter 898. If Xiao Yan is only an ordinary 5-star do D, why would I need to dispatch Yan Hua and Yan Lai? Yan He is a 9-star do D. Don't tell me that he does not have confidence in dealing with a 5-star do D. Moreover, I, Qin Yun, am also a 6-star do D. Does Chairman Fan think that I am unable to deal with an ordinary 5-star do D with my strength? Qin Yun's face carried a cold smile. His words were filled with criticism and ridicule. Chairman Fan, you keep saying that I am doing this on purpose. Even if I am doing this on purpose, would I be so stupid as to send all my guards out and expose my intentions? You are just trying to silence him by killing him. This brat saw that you wanted to kill him, so he stubbornly resisted. Coincidentally, we came out of the auction house and encountered this scene. Chairman Fan curled his lips. Although his mouth was not humble, his heart had already formed a bias towards his own guess. However, it is also what you have said. Xiao Yan is merely a 5-star do D. Even a 9-star do D would not be a match for him, much less 3 of them. Before you came out, Xiao Yan had already exchanged over 100 blows with the 3 of them. According to what you have said, is this possible? Chairman Fan is unwilling to believe what I have said, but you also do not believe that Xiao Yan's strength is not as it appears on the surface. From the way I see it, you are trying to accuse him. Qin Yun was not stingy. Every word and action of his forced Chairman Fan to the bottom of the valley. For a moment, Chairman Fan was speechless. Even the people behind him also lowered their heads in dissatisfaction. Then tell me, even if his fighting strength is not weak, how strong can a 5-star do D be? It was a long while later before Chairman Fan once again spoke. Since President Fan doesn't believe it, why don't you try it yourself? Coincidentally, Yan He and the other 2 can't capture Xiao Yan in a short time. If President Fan helps us, we will definitely be able to capture him. But before that, I hope President Fan can understand that I have participated in many auctions in Jinyao City. If I wanted to do something, I would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Qin Yun let out a cold cry. Immediately, he turned around with a furious face and looked at the current Xiao Yan. His heart, however, was laughing coldly. Everything was proceeding in the direction that he had expected. Although there was an interlude earlier, everything was within his control. In today's battle, Not only did he want Xiao Yan to die, but he also wanted to obtain everything on Xiao Yan's body. The thing that caused him the most excitement was that his plan this time around had been completed without any flaws. Not only had he obtained the Fusong flower, he had also successfully destroyed the great city-protecting formation of Jinyao City. Not long later, his plan would be able to take another step forward. Cuckoo, Fan Siyuan, even if you think until your head breaks, you will not be able to figure out that every word you have said today is within this young master's expectations. I already understand you too well. He. While Qin Yun was secretly laughing in his heart, as the guardian of Jinyao City and the president of the Formation Master Association, he was still kept in the dark. Although Qi Ming had doubts in his heart, Qin Yun's repeated words had caused him to have some doubts about his own judgment. Perhaps, everything was really as Qin Yun had said. It was all done by Xiao Yan. Now, the only person who could prove what Qin Yun had said was naturally Xiao Yan. However, as luck would have it, he was the one who had destroyed the Great Formation. Now, no one would believe his words, much less listen to his explanation. They would only believe that Xiao Yan and Qin Yun were in cahoots. They would not believe that even Xiao Yan was a pawn of theirs. Soon after, Fan Siyuan wanted to step forward. This matter concerned the reputation of his Formation Master Association. As the president, he needed to personally step forward. President, let me go. A mere 5-star Do-D. There is no need for the president to take action. Last time, Qin Yun had stopped me. However, today, let me properly teach this nameless brat who destroyed my great city-protecting formation a lesson. Cheng Zhihui cried out in a deep voice. He took the initiative to ask for a fight. After some consideration in his heart, Fan Siyuan still chose to let Cheng Zhihui take action. He was a 9-star Do-D. If he were to personally take action in order to prove himself, he would lose face. If he were to test the strength of the other party, Cheng Zhihui, being a 7-star Do-D, was undoubtedly qualified for this task. At that time, as long as Cheng Zhihui captured Xiao Yan, Qin Yun's words would naturally be broken. At that time, not only would Xiao Yan have to die, even Qin Yun would also have to pay the price for this matter. The great city-protecting formation of Jinyao City was a rank 5 formation. Although it was only a low-level formation, its strength was still extremely strong. If it were to use its full strength, even an origin transformation expert would be able to block it. For hundreds of years, the Formation Master Association of Jinyao City had relied on this formation to be able to survive in Jinyao City without being disturbed by people from the outside world. However, now that the Great Formation had been broken, the position of the Formation Master Association in Jinyao City would definitely be affected. In the outside world, the overbearing actions of the Formation Master Association during these years had already created quite a number of enemies for them. Once they learned that the Great Formation had been destroyed, many factions would gather here. Even if the 3 great heads of the Formation Master Association were 9-star Do-D, they would not be able to protect the people behind them at the same time. At that time, the Formation Master Association could be considered finished. This was the result that Fan Siyuan could not accept in his heart. He had painstakingly managed the Formation Master Association for so many years. Now, it had been defeated in the hands of a young man. This was really something that he could not accept. Hence, no matter what the result was, this black-robed young man called Xiao Yan in front of him must die. Chi! Following the sharp sound of rushing wind, Cheng Zhihui's body was like a gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan, who was currently surrounded by the 3 people. Brat, I allowed you to refine a medicinal pill the last time. This time around, I will definitely not let you off so easily. Cheng Zhihui's ghost-like figure appeared in front of Xiao Yan. Turbulent Do-Qi covered the surface of Cheng Zhihui's body. His powerful aura attracted the attention of quite a number of people outside the arena. Even Han Dong, who had been quietly observing, could not help but secretly break out in cold sweat for Xiao Yan. However, compared to them, Yan He and the other 2, who had already come into contact with Xiao Yan for hundreds of rounds, sneered with disdain in their hearts. Although Xiao Yan's strength appeared to be far inferior to theirs, the fighting strength that the latter had displayed was not inferior to a village chief, an 8-star Do-D. This was especially so for his frightening speed, which caused Yan He and the other 2 to be left in the dust. How could Cheng Zhihui, who only had the strength of a 7-star Do-D, be a match for Xiao Yan? Sure enough, in the next moment, Xiao Yan, who had been taking the opportunity to quietly recover his Do-Qi, suddenly opened his eyes, which were filled with a fiery glow, when Cheng Zhihui's fist was thrown toward him. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 899. Qi. In midair, Cheng Zhihui's fist, which was filled with strength, violently smashed toward Xiao Yan's face. From the looks of it, it seemed that he had the intention of taking Xiao Yan's life with one blow. Cheng Zhihui wanted to use this opportunity to settle the matter between him and Xiao Yan. Of course, under the suppression of his cultivation, he was not worried that this black-robed young man in front of him would have any ability to resist. A mere 5-star Dodi was nothing in his eyes. However, just as everyone below saw that Cheng Zhihui's fist was about to land on Xiao Yan's face, the latter's slightly shut eyes suddenly opened in the next instant. At the same time, an overbearing force that looked down on the world suddenly swept out from within Xiao Yan's body. It was like an invisible wave. Even though there was no support from Do Qi, that invisible deterrent force was extremely shocking and forcefully forced Cheng Zhihui, who was already in front of him, back. Hua! Immediately, the passers-by on the open ground involuntarily emitted an uproar. At the same time, a shocked expression surged into their eyes when they looked at Xiao Yan. Trash, he has yet to use his Do Qi. Fan Siyuan's old face instantly turned green. He could not resist cursing in a soft voice. This was in exchange for even more mocking laughter from the people below. At this moment, the expression on Cheng Zhihui's face was also extremely ugly. Yan He and the other two laughed coldly in their hearts. Being scared back by just one gaze from the other party, he actually dared to call himself an elite Do Di. He even had the nerve to mention that his cultivation was higher than the other party by 2 stars. This really threw away the face of an elite Do Di. Bastard, you actually dare to threaten the old me. Dang. Sensing the many mocking gazes, the expression on Cheng Zhihui's old face became increasingly ugly. He roared furiously from his mouth and displayed an even more turbulent Do Qi. It was like a cluster of fire that wrapped around his entire body. His body moved and once again launched an attack toward Xiao Yan. In the blink of an eye, the latter's figure had already appeared in front of Xiao Yan. At the same time, his hands violently clenched in front of him. Following a flash of light between his hands, a golden long spear appeared in Cheng Zhihui's hands. The long spear suddenly swung. The sharp tip of the spear was immediately wrapped in ferocious Do Qi as it violently pierced toward Xiao Yan. The tip of the spear emitted a sharp sound of wind breaking as it passed through the empty air. In the next moment, it was only a few inches away from Xiao Yan's throat. Only at this moment did Xiao Yan appear to have just reacted. He instantly lifted his gaze and stared at Cheng Zhihui, who was already very close to him. His right leg exerted strength and a frightening strength was swiftly gathering. Kaka, stinking brat. Go to hell. The cold smile on Cheng Zhihui's face became even denser when he saw Xiao Yan's actions appear to be a couple of beats slower. A 5-star Do Di was ultimately a 5-star Do Di. He was unable to contend with a 7-star Do Di class expert. Xiao Yan was destined to lose this battle. The price of this loss was his life. At this moment, Han Dong, who was hidden in the crowd, finally could not endure it any longer. The Do Qi in his body was swiftly circulating. Once Xiao Yan was no match for him, he would immediately attack. Xiao Yan was someone he had invited to join the Alchemist Alliance. His talent in alchemy was something he had never seen before. No matter what, he could not let anything happen to Xiao Yan. However, in the next moment, when the long spear was about to pierce Xiao Yan's throat, the indifferent Xiao Yan suddenly turned his body sideways. The frightening speed of his movement caused everyone who saw it to feel shocked. Cheng Zhihui, who was the closest to Xiao Yan, had an even more indescribable shock in his heart. How is this guy's speed? Qi! The long spear flew close to Xiao Yan's chest, emitting a chi-chi sound as it broke through the air. Almost at the same time, Xiao Yan abruptly lifted his right leg. His calf exerted strength and his body stood to the side. At the same time, a heavy whip leg was abruptly lifted high and mercilessly smashed into Cheng Zhihui's chest. In an instant, Cheng Zhihui's eyes shrunk until they were the size of a needle. After which, his body was like a soccer ball in front of the gazes of the large group of people in the open ground. He was heavily kicked, flying with a muffled collision sound. Soon after, Cheng Zhihui's body, which had flown backwards, destroyed a large number of houses under that frightening strength. Finally, he heavily collided with an enormous rock. Soon after, a chi-chi sound was emitted. Cheng Zhihui's expression swiftly turned pale. What a frightening physical strength! Everyone looked at Cheng Zhihui, who had flown backwards. After which, they turned their gazes toward Xiao Yan. Soon after, waves of saliva-swallowing sounds sounded in the open ground. Numerous gazes that were filled with shock stared intently at Xiao Yan in the open ground. The shock in everyone's hearts was incomparable. They had never expected that Cheng Zhihui, a 7-star Dodi, would actually be sent flying by a 5-star Dodi. Moreover, from the looks of Cheng Zhihui's current condition, even though he was not dead, Xiao Yan's attack earlier had caused him quite a great injury. A 7-star Dodi is merely a... Xiao Yan's expression was ice-cold as he scoffed. Cough cough. Brat, you should not be too pleased. I was merely careless earlier and underestimated you. However, you will not be so lucky next time. Cheng Zhihui stood up in a miserable manner. He wiped off the blood that seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He beckoned with his large hand, and the golden spear that was inserted into the ground in the distance swiftly returned to his hand. Soon after, his body moved and once again charged toward Xiao Yan. Low Spirit Class Do Technique, Flying Shadow. A loud cry was emitted from Cheng Zhihui's mouth. Immediately, the golden spear in his hand trembled intensely. A large area of spear shadows immediately fell wildly toward Xiao Yan like dense raindrops. Swoosh 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 swoosh. The densely packed spear shadows fell toward the top of Xiao Yan's head. Each spear shadow would leave behind a distorted vacuum area when it rushed through the empty space. After this large area of spear shadows rushed past, the invisible empty space was almost distorted and shattered. Soon after, Cheng Zhihui's body once again arrived in front of Xiao Yan. The tip of his spear was pointed at Xiao Yan as it violently pierced toward the latter's head. However, the expression on Xiao Yan's face was still incomparably calm in the face of Cheng Zhihui's attack. Both of his eyes focused on the large area of chaotic spear shadows that were swiftly shooting toward him. An enormous spiritual strength immediately surged out from between his brows. Everything in this world had become clear in his eyes. At the same time, the chaotic spear shadows' movements also slowed. Swoosh! Xiao Yan's body moved slightly to the side. A spear shadow brushed past Xiao Yan's body as it flew out. After which, Xiao Yan once again turned his body. His feet were either to the left or to the right. His body leaned forward or leaned forward. He was able to perfectly dodge the spear shadows that were about to land on his body. Even if there were some that he could not dodge, they were similarly broken by Xiao Yan using the simplest overbearing method with a punch. This kind of agility was really like a ghost. Even those high-class Dodi who were watching the fight outside of the arena felt extremely shocked when they saw it. Was this really something that a 5-star Dodi could do? Such a strange agility was something that even some of them did not have the confidence to successfully capture. At this moment, even Fan Siyuan and the others felt their hearts involuntarily sink when they saw it. Just from this agility, one could tell that Cheng Zhihui was no match for Xiao Yan. Now, the only thing that they could hope for was that Cheng Zhihui's following attack would be able to suppress Xiao Yan. After dealing with the countless number of spear shadows, Xiao Yan immediately had to face Cheng Zhihui himself. Seeing that Xiao Yan had actually dodged his Do technique so easily, Cheng Zhihui was both shocked and furious. Cold sweat continued to emerge from his forehead. However, the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. At this moment, he could only brace himself and place his hopes on his following attack. Both of his hands waved the long spear with all his strength. The body of the spear swayed, and a sharp aura pierced towards the vital points on Xiao Yan's body. The tip of the spear was like a venomous snake, revealing its sharpness. Sea dragon emerges from the sea. The long spear danced. Powerful Do Qi swiftly agglomerated on the surface of the long spear, turning into the illusory image of a 1,000-feet-long serpent. Following the pouring of Do Qi, it quickly solidified. Soon after, the serpent twisted its huge body. It was accompanied by an earth-shaking roar as it shot towards Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's eyes were calm as he watched the huge serpent rushing towards him. He did not have any intention of dodging. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. His hand curled into a claw. With a thought, the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor immediately covered his entire hand. A thick white flame also lingered on it at the same time. Immediately, just as the serpent was in front of him, Xiao Yan extended his hand. His action was as quick as lightning as he forcefully restrained the serpent that had arrived in front of him. Soon after, under Cheng Zhihui's shocked eyes, Xiao Yan's hand suddenly exerted force and actually forcefully crushed the serpent in front of him. A mere serpent is merely an earthworm in front of a huge dragon. After destroying the serpent, the long spear under it was firmly held in Xiao Yan's hand. A cold smile surfaced on Xiao Yan's face. His aura was not weak. However, under the premise of his strength elephant skill, dragon phoenix ancient armor, and heavenly flame, it was basically useless. Cheng Zhihui's expression finally changed drastically after the serpent was destroyed. He wanted to withdraw his golden spear, but he realized that the weapon in his hand was actually firmly held in Xiao Yan's hand. He was unable to withdraw it. Damn it! Cheng Zhihui cursed viciously in his heart. He simply gave up on the long spear in his hand and his body instantly retreated. While he was retreating, both of his hands were swiftly lifted. His 10 fingers moved together and formed hand seals in a lightning-like manner. The familiar and complicated hand seals were continuously formed. In the blink of an eye, they agglomerated into a huge energy hand seal in front of him. Hell King Seal! Cheng Zhihui cried out explosively after the seal was formed. The surging dou qi in his body was wildly poured into the energy hand seal in front of him, causing the light on it to shake greatly. It was like a bright sun that emitted a glaring white light. It was about to blast toward Xiao Yan. Crack! In the next moment, a clear cracking sound was suddenly emitted from the energy hand seal. Soon after, numerous clear crack lines swiftly climbed onto the entire energy hand seal. Chapter 900. Bang! Cheng Zhihui's eyes were dull as he looked at the energy handprint in front of him that had suddenly collapsed in midair. His originally pale face had become completely bloodless in an instant. The aura of his entire body had also suddenly fallen to rock bottom. The Ming King seal that he had just formed had suddenly disappeared. The sudden backlash from the energy caused him to instantly descend into a seriously injured state. Why? Cheng Zhihui's body fell weakly to the ground. He raised his head with great difficulty. Only then did he see Xiao Yan's figure slowly appear in his sight after the energy handprint disappeared. At this moment, the latter's figure was still the same as before. He was still in the same state as when he punched out. However, the Hell King seal in front of him had already been forcibly shattered. Cheng Zhihui's heart was incomparably terrified when he saw this scene. Although the Ming King seal could not be considered a powerful dou technique, it was one of the few trump cards that he possessed. Even so, it was unable to endure even one strike from this black-robed young man in front of him. The most unbelievable thing was that the other party was merely a 5-star dou D. How is this possible? At this moment, a great storm was involuntarily lifted within Cheng Zhihui's heart. The change in his emotions caused the originally serious injuries within his body to become even more serious. At the same time, Xiao Yan withdrew his fist that had been thrown forward. When his hand was covered by his sleeve, one could clearly see traces of blood gradually appearing. After all, he was a 7-star dou D. Xiao Yan had paid quite a great price for that punch earlier in order to achieve a deterrent effect. At this moment, Xiao Yan raised his eyes and looked over. As expected, quite a number of people present were immersed in the memory of the powerful punch that Xiao Yan had thrown out earlier. Of course, there were also a couple of people who were exceptions. One example was the few 9-star dou D. Although this was the case, they were still a little absent-minded at this moment. Xiao Yan coldly laughed in his heart when he saw this. If he did not leave now, when would he leave? At this moment, Fan Siyuan's turbid eyes were also staring at Xiao Yan in a daze. Deep within his eyes, there was also an indelible shock. At the same time, he was somewhat certain of what Qin Yun had said. This little fellow, what frightening fighting strength. That attack earlier is likely not inferior to an ordinary 8-star dou D. Based on Xiao Yan's attack just now, he was certain that Xiao Yan's battle prowess far exceeded his cultivation. Fan Siyuan squinted his old eyes. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he became. The current Xiao Yan was merely a 5-star dou D. Yet, he already possessed such a frightening fighting strength. It was difficult to imagine that if he continued to maintain this state, when his cultivation advanced in the future, even origin transformation experts would not be a match for him. Thinking in this way, a desire to kill Xiao Yan rose in Fan Siyuan's heart. Today, regardless of whether it was Xiao Yan or their actions, they were destined to be enemies. Hence, for the future of their Formation Master Association, he must kill Xiao Yan today and eliminate all future troubles. Swoosh! However, the moment Fan Siyuan raised his eyes, Xiao Yan's body turned into a breeze and swiftly flew out of Jinyao City with a lightning-like speed. You want to leave? How can it be so easy? Stay behind. A low cry was emitted from Fan Siyuan's mouth. The group of people behind him immediately recovered. Their bodies moved and they led the two people beside them as they swiftly gave chase in the direction that Xiao Yan had left. At the same time, Xiao Yan and the other two also hurriedly gave chase under Qin Yun's signal. No matter what, Xiao Yan must die here today. The black robe covered Xiao Yan's entire body, completely wrapping around his aura. His body was carried by the flowing wind as he swiftly flew forward. His entire body was hidden within the flowing wind. One could neither see his body nor sense his aura. One could only feel a hurricane whistling past the empty space. If it was any other time, no one would be curious about this. However, at this moment, Fan Siyuan and the others clearly understood in their hearts that Xiao Yan's body was definitely within that cluster of flowing wind. What they needed to do now was to surround that cluster of flowing wind. Qi Ming, Hulia, activate the formation and stop him for me. Fan Siyuan let out a stern cry. At the same time, Qi Ming and Hulia, who were behind him, nodded heavily after hearing the order. The two of them looked at each other and their bodies rapidly rushed forward. Between their hands, numerous complicated seals were rapidly formed. At the same time, the golden runes on the city walls of Jinyao City suddenly emitted a bright light. Immediately, a huge golden light screen rose again and surrounded the entire city. The sudden appearance of this scene caused everyone in the city to be shocked, especially Qin Yun. He had prepared so much in order to destroy this formation. Why was this thing still here? Could it be that the formation was not destroyed at all? Could it be that the stone pillar was fake? Qin Yun's heart trembled. He could not believe that these three old fellows had guarded the stone pillar for so many years. Could it be that they had done it on purpose? That stone pillar was not the center of this formation at all? Young master, that's not right. This doesn't seem to be the formation. This thing is strange. Just as Qin Yun was shocked, he seemed to have sensed something. He frowned and stepped forward, whispering to Qin Yun. Strange. Speak clearly. Although this formation doesn't seem to have changed, if you examine it carefully, you'll discover that the power of this formation has clearly decreased by more than half. From the looks of it, this doesn't seem to be a Tier 5 formation. They should have added it themselves. Their goal should be to guard against a situation like this. As He's words fell, Qin Yun quickly discovered the strangeness of this formation. Immediately, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. On the other side, following the activation of the formation, Xiao Yan, who was originally about to leave the area of Jinyao City, was forced to slow down. Fan Siyuan and the rest chased closely behind, followed by Qin Yun's group. A group of people surrounded the empty space in front of them. Their gazes were cautious. Fan Siyuan released a huge amount of spiritual strength and swept it across the empty space in front of him. Sure enough, Xiao Yan, who was wearing a black robe, was exposed. In front of a rank 4 formation master, Xiao Yan really found it difficult to continue hiding. The Great Void Dao could only ensure that his aura would not be discovered by others, but he could not maintain the concealment of his body. Xiao Yan was not too surprised by the current situation. What he was concerned about was the formation that had risen once again. Fortunately, under his investigation, he quickly discovered that this was only a rank 4 defensive formation. If that was the case, perhaps he still had a chance. Chapter 901. In the sky above Jinyao City, a bright golden light rose high up and agglomerated into a huge energy barrier. It wrapped around the entire Jinyao City, preventing anyone from entering or exiting. In the sky above the city, 7 figures each took one side and formed an encirclement, surrounding Xiao Yan in the middle. Xiao Yan, although our Formation Master Association and your Alchemist Alliance are like fire and water, we have been minding our own business recently. By doing this, are you trying to declare war on our Formation Master Association? Fan Siyuan's turbid old eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan as he cried out in a deep voice. If it was possible, he did not wish to fall out with the Alchemist Alliance. After all, the Alchemist Alliance was a branch of the Pill Tower and was directly managed by the Pill Tower. Once they started a war, it would be going against the Pill Tower. The Pill Tower was publicly recognized as the strongest faction in the entire continent. Although their Formation Master Association and the Alchemist Alliance had never been on good terms, they had never reached such a state. However, today, Xiao Yan had destroyed the great city-protecting formation of Jinyao City. That was a rank 5 formation. Just this point alone had caused the relationship between the two parties to worsen in an instant. Chairman Fan, why is there a need to speak so much with such a person? I originally thought that this fellow had great talent and was someone who could be befriended. However, I never expected that it was I, Qin Yun, who had misjudged and caused you to do such a disgraceful thing. Today, no matter what, I will definitely take your life to repay the sins you have committed. However, without waiting for Xiao Yan to open his mouth, Qin Yun, who was beside Yan He, stared at Xiao Yan with an ice-cold gaze as he cried out with sharp words. The moment these words were said, Fan Siyuan and the others frowned slightly. Although Qin Yun's words were impassioned, they felt a trace of discomfort in their ears. It was as though a bloodthirsty wolf had suddenly become docile, causing one to involuntarily feel a chill in one's heart. However, before they could think any further, Qin Yun waved his large hand and ordered Yan He and the other two beside him to attack Xiao Yan. As for Qin Yun himself, he remained where he was. Under the precondition of ensuring his own safety, he coldly observed from the side. At the same time, the Do Qi in his body was prepared at all times. Should there be an opportunity, he would not be stingy in giving Xiao Yan a fatal blow. Chi chi chi. 3 human figures shot explosively toward Xiao Yan from 3 different directions. The whistling sound of rushing wind lingered in one's ears. 3 powerful auras intertwined around Xiao Yan's body and turned into one, causing his originally powerful aura to become even more frightening. In the face of such a lineup, Xiao Yan could not help but frown as a grave expression appeared on his face. In order to deal with Cheng Zhihui earlier, he had already exhausted quite a lot of his physical strength. The reason why he did not use his Do Qi was because he wanted to face such a situation. However, he did not expect that the result would be much more troublesome than he had expected. From the looks of it, the 3 of them had not used their full strength earlier. Their goal is to delay until Fan Siyuan sees that scene, huh? In order to let Fan Siyuan see with his own eyes that the city-protecting formation was destroyed in front of Xiao Yan, Qin Yun had deliberately allowed Yan He and the other 2 to hold back. Now that Qin Yun's goal had been achieved, the 3 of them naturally did not need to continue holding back. As long as they killed Xiao Yan here, they really did not need to worry about Fan Siyuan doing anything to them. Although the Array Formation Master Association was not weak, in front of the power behind Qin Yun, it was nothing but a small fry in the presence of a great magician. He, Xiao Yan. We were unable to finish you off earlier. Now that we have 6 9-star Do Di, the old me does not believe that you alone can do anything. Ha, you should obediently surrender as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will suffer physical pain. The 3 of them coldly laughed. Turbulent and surging Do Qi swept out from the bodies of the 3 of them like waves, charging explosively toward Xiao Yan from all directions. Ha! Xiao Yan did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in this regard. He let out a loud cry in his heart and his body suddenly shook at the same time. A ferocious thick white flame immediately lingered within the vortex and swiftly covered Xiao Yan's entire body. Yan He and the other 2 arrived in front of Xiao Yan at almost the same time. The 3 of them each slammed their palms heavily onto Xiao Yan's body. Surging Do Qi covered their entire palms. The powerful strength emitted a sharp piercing sound as it cut through the air. Soon after, it was about to land. Swoosh! It was also at this moment that Xiao Yan's footsteps changed. He used the Sky Extinction Step and did his best to dodge the combined attacks of the 3 of them. The 3 human figures surrounded Xiao Yan's body. This time around, they did not easily withdraw even with the obstruction of the heavenly flame. Therefore, at such a close distance, even if Xiao Yan used the Sky Extinction Step, he was still unable to completely dodge the attacks of the 3 of them. Hence, even though Xiao Yan managed to dodge a couple of vital points on his body, his left shoulder and back had also received a palm each. Even with the protection of the heavenly flame, the attacks of the 2 9-star Do Di still caused Xiao Yan's expression to instantly turn pale. Humph! A muffled snort was involuntarily emitted from Xiao Yan's nose. He flipped his hand and forced Yan He, who was in close proximity, back. Soon after, his body swiftly withdrew. His throat rolled and a trace of blood involuntarily flowed down from the corner of his mouth. Damn it, this is their true strength. Xiao Yan unwillingly cursed in his heart. However, before he could catch his breath, Qi Ming and Hua Lai from the Formation Master Association suddenly charged over. They were like sharp arrows. In the blink of an eye, they had already appeared in front of Xiao Yan. "Brat, die!" Hua Lai's mouth emitted a ferocious cry. His entire body emitted a dense flame aura as he violently charged at Xiao Yan. Qi Ming's body by the side was even faster. As he flew, a gust of wind swiftly swept past him. Numerous tornadoes involuntarily agglomerated around Qi Ming's body. From this point, it was not difficult to see that the latter was a wind affinity expert. Blazing palm. Whirlwind scattered clouds. Following the appearance of the two loud cries, Qi Ming and Hua Lai's bodies had already appeared in front of Xiao Yan. Each of them displayed a powerful Do skill that heavily smashed toward Xiao Yan. Ha! Once again emitting a loud cry in his heart. This time, Xiao Yan's body retreated as he frantically agglomerated the enormous spiritual strength between his eyebrows. In this kind of battle, even spiritual strength was one of Xiao Yan's main methods of fighting. Even if the results were not great, it was one of the few forces that Xiao Yan could mobilize. Of course, at the same time that he was mobilizing his spiritual strength, the Do Qi within the vortex within his body was also frantically agglomerating. Xiao Yan clearly knew in his heart that it was impossible for him to rely on a single spiritual Do skill to block the combined attacks of the two in front of him. Only a sufficiently powerful Do skill would be able to temporarily block them. If he wanted to temporarily resolve all of this trouble, it was likely that he would need an even more powerful Do skill. Angry Buddha Lotus Flame. Unfortunately, the current situation caused Xiao Yan to be helpless. He had to fight for a way to agglomerate the angry Buddha Lotus Flame at the same time as he forced the people in front of him to retreat. At that time, the appearance of the angry Buddha Lotus Flame would definitely be able to force this group of people to retreat temporarily. At the same time, this was also the only way for Xiao Yan to break the rank 4 formation behind him. However, just as Xiao Yan was thinking of how to resolve the situation in front of him, Fan Siyuan, who was behind Xiao Yan, slightly curled his hand under his sleeves. A powerful Do Qi quietly agglomerated in his palm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 902. Bang! Following a thunder-like roar, Xiao Yan, Qi Ming, and Hua Lai each flew back by 100 steps in the sky above Jinyao City. Powerful energy ripples swiftly swept out in all directions with the three of them at the center, transforming into a storm that randomly wreaked havoc in the city. Humph! The instant Xiao Yan stabilized his body, his face swiftly turned bright red. Soon after, a mouthful of fresh blood was involuntarily spat out from his mouth. In the blink of an eye, his bright red face swiftly turned pale. Fighting 1 against 2, facing 2 9-star Do D at the same time, was really too difficult. Moreover, the strength of these two could be considered among the top even among the 9-star Do D. At the same time, Qi Ming and Hua Lai, who were facing Xiao Yan, also appeared unusually shocked at this moment. The seriousness in their hearts could not be any greater. This brat's fighting strength is really strong. Although he is indeed a 5-star Do D, regardless of whether it is the thickness of the Do Qi within his body, his control over the Do Qi, or the quantity, they are not inferior to a 6-star Do D. There is also that heavenly flame. That damn thing is the most troublesome to deal with. Even we have to be wary of its overbearing destructive strength. If it was not because of that thing, this fellow would not be able to unleash such a powerful strength. Their hearts were filled with all sorts of shock. At the same time, Xiao Yan also caused them to be uncertain. Although his fighting strength was frightening, the latter's defensive strength seemed to have far exceeded their expectations. Even if their attacks were to face a 9-star Do D of the same level, they might not be able to seriously injure the latter, but they would definitely cause the latter to suffer. However, Xiao Yan in front of them was merely a 5-star Do D. Although he had barely blocked their attacks, the injuries that he had received were not what the two of them had expected. The latter's physical strength could be said to be frightening. This was especially so when they saw the layer of scales that covered Xiao Yan's hand. Their hearts felt even more terrified. Was the person in front of them a human or a magical beast? Such an abnormality was something that they had never seen or heard of in their entire lives. While the three of them were gasping for breath, Fan Siyuan, who was in the distance, disappeared into the void in an instant. Almost at the same time, Han Dong's face also revealed a solemn expression as he flashed his body from the crowd outside of the battleground. With a lightning-like speed, he flew toward Xiao Yan, who was currently being attacked from all sides within the battleground. Swish! The next moment, just as Xiao Yan was preparing to maneuver the Do Qi in his body and once again face Yan He and the other two who were charging toward him, Fan Siyuan's figure suddenly appeared in the empty space behind him. A claw viciously slashed at Xiao Yan's back. What? Feeling the dangerous and sharp qi behind him, Xiao Yan's heart was greatly shocked. He did not expect that this old man would actually suddenly attack him at such a critical moment. Did he want to use this kind of sneak attack to end this battle? Brat, don't blame me for being vicious. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for actually daring to destroy the great city-protecting formation of my Jinyao city. Today, even if the association head of your alchemist alliance were to come, he would still be unable to save you. Fan Siyuan's old face was gloomy. As the words from his mouth sounded, the movements of his hands became even sharper. Such a powerful and overbearing attack was something that even the current Xiao Yan did not have the ability to resist. Oh, is that so? However, at the next moment, a deep and old voice was suddenly transmitted from the sky. It was like the sound of a bell that reverberated unceasingly in the sky. At the same time, behind Xiao Yan, an extremely large spiritual strength suddenly agglomerated in front of Fan Siyuan. The enormous spiritual strength seemed to have substance as it condensed into a tangible entity behind Xiao Yan. It was like a tall wall that blocked Fan Siyuan's extremely tyrannical claw attack. Following a beautiful spark, a sharp and ear-piercing creaking sound exploded in the air. A belly wave swept out once again, stopping Yan He and the other two who were originally rushing towards Xiao Yan. Immediately after, when the spiritual wall dissipated, Fan Siyuan hurriedly retreated with a serious face. At the same time, a pair of sharp eyes constantly swept across the space in front of him. Who is it? Hee, President Fan, we haven't seen each other for so many years, yet you don't even recognize this old man? Immediately after, behind Xiao Yan, an old man dressed in a brocade robe slowly appeared. It was the vice president of the Alchemist Alliance, Han Dong. You are Han Dong. The moment he saw this person, the muscles on Fan Siyuan's old face couldn't help but twitch violently. In an instant, a storm was set off in his heart. He never thought that this fellow would actually appear here. In that case, the ones who destroyed the Great City Barrier Array were really them. Hee, looks like President Fan still remembers this old man. Han Dong gently stroked his beard with one hand and smiled. Xiao Yan's expression was slightly startled as he turned around from behind. His gaze immediately landed on Han Dong in front of him. President Han. Hee, little friend Xiao Yan, don't worry. Let this old man settle this matter today. Han Dong extended his hand with a gentle smile and patted Xiao Yan's shoulder. He didn't look worried at all. Han Dong, the vice president of the Alchemist Alliance, Han Dong. I never thought that he would actually appear here. But that's good as well. This way, it can even more prove Xiao Yan's sins. Seeing Han Dong's appearance, Qin Yun's face first revealed an astonished expression, following which, the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Although there were many surprises, it was fortunate that everything was still within his control. Humph, Han Dong, you sent people to destroy the Rank 5 Great Array of the Array Master Association. Now, you still want to save him? Do you really think that my Golden Glory City is a place where you can come and go as you please? Seeing Han Dong's calm appearance, Fan Siyuan's heart was filled with endless rage. His body shook and surging Do Qi immediately surged out of his body. It was like a raging flame that rose unceasingly. At the same time, Qi Ming and Hua Lai moved together. The three of them each took a side and surrounded Xiao Yan and Han Dong. Behind them was another group of experts from the Array Master Association. They formed a special formation with each other. Each of them released a large amount of spiritual strength and merged with each other. Humph. Then let's give it a try, Han Dong said in a deep voice. At the same time, his old face involuntarily revealed a serious expression. It was obvious that even though he was a rank 5 alchemist, he did not have much confidence in facing 3 9-star Do D and over 10 powerful array masters at the same time. It was also at this moment that Xiao Yan grabbed Han Dong's wrist. Using a voice that only the two of them could barely hear, he softly said, Han Dong, can you help me for a while? Guild leader Han, can you help me stall for a moment? 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we'll leave this place. Hearing Xiao Yan's words, Han Dong could not help but raise his eyebrows. He felt astonished in his heart. Where did Xiao Yan get his confidence from? They were facing Do Di. Although this was the case, Han Dong did not know why, but he had a special kind of confidence in this black-robed young man in front of him. It seemed that his words were not false. Even though this was only the second time they had met, he felt an indescribable attraction from Xiao Yan's body. Finally, Han Dong nodded heavily and said, "All right. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I guarantee that none of them will be able to get close to you." Chapter 903. On Qin Yun's side. He quietly laughed in his heart when he saw that the Array Master Association and the Alchemist Alliance were in a state of mutual hostility. Haha, let's fight. Fight. Fight fiercely. If they all die, it will save us some trouble. Ha 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 ha. Young master, do we still need to participate now? Beside Qin Yun were Yen He and the other two. At this moment, the three of them tactfully withdrew when they saw the situation in the arena. They would only listen to Qin Yun's arrangements. Participate. We will naturally participate. However, now is not the time. When the sandpiper and clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Since they want to fight now, let them fight. Let them fight to their heart's content. It will be best if both sides are seriously injured. We will then be able to benefit from it. Wouldn't that be great? Qin Yun's face revealed a ferocious smile. The three people beside him also laughed awkwardly. After which, they turned their gazes toward the battleground in unison. Han Dong, although you are a rank 5 alchemist, you are ultimately only a 7-star Do Di. Do you think that it is possible for you to face the three of us by yourself? Moreover, we have the most elite Array Masters of our Array Master Association behind us. You are destined to have no chance of winning this battle. Fan Siyuan coldly smiled as he stared at Han Dong opposite him. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Humph, big brother, why do you need to speak nonsense with them? They have already committed a capital offense by destroying the city-protecting formation of our Jinyao city. It is fine if this Han Dong has a special identity. However, Xiao Yan, who is behind you, must die here today. Hua Lai stared at Xiao Yan with a murderous expression. His powerful Do Chi was like a wave crashing against a reef. Following a thought from Hua Lai, the Do Chi swept out and turned into a sharp arrow. It pierced through the air and shot toward Xiao Yan. Ding! However, in the next moment, a huge and invisible soul power suddenly condensed in the void and easily blocked the arrow. If you want to touch him, you will have to get past me first. Han Dong took a step forward. A powerful aura immediately leaked out. An invisible spiritual strength was released from between his eyebrows and covered the entire battleground. Attack! Fan Siyuan let out a cold cry. The three human figures immediately rushed forward. Powerful Do Chi mercilessly tore through the empty space. The three of them flipped their hands and numerous powerful Do Chi pillars shot forward, violently smashing toward Han Dong. Han Dong also controlled his enormous spiritual strength to meet the attacks of these three people head-on. At the same time, the group of powerful formation masters from the Formation Master Association also relied on their enormous soul power to form numerous complicated talismans in the void. These talismans emitted an extremely terrifying aura of destruction. Puff! At the same time as the two parties collided, Xiao Yan's mind moved and several balls of ferocious heavenly flames of different colors rose from the void in front of him. Qin Yun, who was outside the battle circle, immediately noticed Xiao Yan's side the instant these few clusters of flames rose. This was especially so when his gaze landed on the few clusters of ferocious flames that rose in front of the former. Even with his mental fortitude, he could not help but be startled in his heart. That is, how can there be so many heavenly flames on this fellow's body at the same time? The muscles at the corner of Qin Yun's eyes could not help but twitch intensely. His heart felt a sense of shock because of this. However, he quickly realized that other than the bone-chilling flame, the rest of the flames were only some seed flames. So it's only seed flames, huh? Only after realizing this point did Qin Yun's heart relax. Due to him being of the ice attribute, he would feel repulsed by any kind of flame. This was especially so for this heavenly flame. It could be said that he feared it. As the king of flames, the heavenly flame suppression of the ice attribute was absolute. Until now, the only natural treasure that Qin Yun knew that could suppress a heavenly flame was the ice spirit cold liquid. Xiao Yan's pitch-black eyes stared at the few clusters of flames in front of him. A raging firelight was reflected in his eyes. Without any hesitation, He raised both of his hands and fiercely slapped the flames in front of him together. With a crisp paw sound, the few clusters of flames were heavily kneaded together between Xiao Yan's hands. Sparks flew in all directions. The powerful energy within the flames turned into a circular flame wave that uncontrollably spread outwards. The entire cluster of flames violently trembled between Xiao Yan's hands, as if it wanted to break free from Xiao Yan's control. The raging flames continued to struggle. However, with regards to this, Xiao Yan's heart was especially calm. Xiao Yan's expression did not change. He was the creator of the Angry Buddha Lotus Flame. No one was more familiar with the characteristics of the Angry Buddha Lotus Flame than him. If it was in the past, before the bone-freezing flame was swallowed and refined by Xiao Yan, perhaps this process would be incomparably difficult. However, the bone-freezing flame had already accepted Xiao Yan as its master. This little rebellion was just like a child's play in Xiao Yan's eyes. With a thought, a huge amount of spiritual strength immediately surged outwards and rapidly poured into the brilliant cluster of flames between his hands. Very quickly, the cluster of flames calmed down. The few clusters of flames within also rapidly merged together at this moment. This fellow! Is he crazy? What exactly is he doing? As he watched the transformation of the cluster of flames between Xiao Yan's hands, Qin Yun, who was outside the battle circle, could not help but feel agitated in his originally calm heart. Xiao Yan had forcefully merged the few clusters of flames together in front of his own eyes. Originally, he thought that Xiao Yan would fail. However, from the looks of the current situation, the rebellion of the cluster of flames seemed to be completely under Xiao Yan's control. Moreover, the energy that was occasionally emitted from the cluster of flames actually caused his heart to palpitate. The thing that caused him to be most alarmed was that the energy within the cluster of flames was actually still soaring at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, it quickly exceeded the limits of what he could endure. It was hard to imagine that if he waited for Xiao Yan to stop, the energy that would be released when the cluster of flames erupted would cause even him to have difficulty escaping death. No, I must stop him. Qin Yun's expression became grave. When his gaze looked at the three people beside him, the gazes of the three brothers had already been fixed on Xiao Yan's body. At this moment, even their hearts were similarly grave. It was hard to imagine that such a frightening Do skill was something that a 5-star half-emperor could easily unleash. The three of you attacked together. We must stop him. Qin Yun cried out loudly from his mouth. His feet involuntarily withdrew as he handed all the threats in front of him to the three people beside him. Hearing Qin Yun's words, the faces of the three of them twitched intensely. Their hearts were extremely unreconciled. However, in the end, their bodies flashed and they used their fastest speed to charge explosively toward Xiao Yan. Although Han Dong's appearance caused the experts from both sides to feel a wave of shock, it was only when they noticed the cluster of raging flames between Xiao Yan's hands that they understood that the most troublesome one among the two was undoubtedly Xiao Yan. Even Han Dong, who was a rank 5 alchemist, did not have a Do skill that could truly threaten them. However, Xiao Yan in front of them was different. Earlier, they had already seen the latter's powerful fighting strength that far exceeded his own cultivation. At this moment, the cluster of seemingly calm flame in his hand caused their hearts to tremble. Swoosh! A sharp sound of rushing wind that caused one's eardrums to ache sounded. The bodies of Yan He and the other two had already swiftly approached Xiao Yan. At the same time, Han Dong on the other side had naturally sensed the intentions of the three of them. If you want to touch him, you should first ask this old man. Han Dong's body swiftly approached Xiao Yan. At the same time, his spiritual strength crazily surged outwards, agglomerating into 3 long spears that shot towards Yan He and the other two. Bang bang bang! Faced with Han Dong's attack, even with the strength of Yan He and the other two, they did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in their hearts. Helpless, they could only stop their bodies and forcefully block the long spears that were flying over. Ha ha ha, Han Dong. What you should be concerned about now should be yourself. You still dare to be distracted when facing the three of us. You are really seeking death. However, it was also at this moment that Fan Siyuan and the other two suddenly approached Han Dong. Each of their hands displayed a powerful Do skill that was quite powerful and forcefully held Han Dong back. Yan He and the other two also took the opportunity to once again charge explosively towards Xiao Yan. Bastard! You are seeking death. Seeing the three of them once again charging towards Xiao Yan, Han Dong's mouth emitted an earth-shaking explosive cry. His heart was filled with killing intent as he once again flashed his body in an attempt to block the three of them. However, he was helpless as Fan Siyuan and the other two in front of him also used all of their strength to display their tactics and block him. Both parties continued to be in a stalemate. At this moment, Yan He and the other two had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Their faces revealed a fierce expression as each of them displayed their Do skills and were about to land on Xiao Yan's body. However, it was also at this moment that Xiao Yan, who was originally completely focused on agglomerating the fire lotus in his hand, suddenly raised his head. His expression was cold as it swept over the three people in front of him. At the same time, his footsteps changed and the sky extinction steps was displayed. Only then did he narrowly dodge the attacks of the three of them. Although this was the case, Yan He and the other two were like maggots in the bones as they relentlessly chased after him. Even though Xiao Yan's speed was unusually fast, the distance between the two was also becoming increasingly smaller under the repeated pursuit of the 3-9-star Do D. On the other side, although Han Dong had the intention to help Xiao Yan, he was helpless as the three people in front of him firmly held him back. Regardless of what methods he used, he was unable to escape. On the other hand, the current Xiao Yan's heart was much calmer. When his dark black eyes swept over the three people in front of him, a glint flashed deep within them. He involuntarily let out a cold laugh in his heart. The storage ring on his finger flickered under the cover of the fire. As time passed by minute, the flame between Xiao Yan's hands had already completely transformed into a beautiful fire lotus. Within it, only the final thread of energy was left to perfectly merge. After which, the angry Buddha lotus flame could be considered to have been successfully agglomerated. However, it was also at this moment that Qin Yun's figure had unknowingly appeared behind Xiao Yan, who was surrounded by Yan He and the other two. Chapter 904. Qi! Xiao Yan's body flickered in the air as he repeatedly pulled back. At the same time, he appeared to have successfully dodged Yan Hua's attack in a dangerous manner. Immediately, he flew back in front of the latter's eyes, which were about to spit fire. Immediately after, Yan He continued to charge forward. The three of them were like a wheel battle, constantly forcing Xiao Yan to retreat. Until a certain moment, Xiao Yan die. A ferocious smile emerged on Yan He's old face. His body rapidly rushed forward as he brandished the short sword in his hands and slashed at Xiao Yan's throat. In this regard, Xiao Yan's eyes were calm. His pair of pitch-black eyes stared at the short sword that was rapidly enlarging in his pupils. When it quickly approached his throat, Xiao Yan tilted his head slightly and dodged it. Soon after, another short sword came slashing from the left. This time around, the short sword stuck close to the scale armor on the surface of Xiao Yan's body and dangerously swung past. It seems that you don't have the ability to kill me. After dodging Yan He's two attacks, Xiao Yan said in an indifferent tone. He immediately raised his head and turned his gaze to the latter again, only to see a ferocious smile emerging on Yan He's old face. Yes, I can't kill you, but someone can. Immediately after, the moment Xiao Yan's mocking laughter fell, an extremely cold killing intent suddenly approached Xiao Yan from behind. In the blink of an eye, it had already appeared behind Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's eyes were indifferent as he looked at the person behind him from the corner of his eye. It was Qin Yun. At this moment, there was a sharp dagger that was agglomerated from cold ice in Qin Yun's hand. It was emitting a coldness that caused one's heart to tremble. The sharp ice blade was aimed at Xiao Yan's heart and ruthlessly pierced it. Wherever it passed, ice fragments would appear in the empty space. Die. As long as you die, everything that happened today will be over. Clang! However, just as the dagger in Qin Yun's hand was about to pierce through Xiao Yan's heart from his back, a purple gold hand suddenly grabbed the dagger without any reason. Kacha! Soon after, a clear sound of a horn continuously rang out. Qin Yun felt the dagger in his hand tremble violently. Under the pain, the latter had no choice but to release his grip. Soon after, he clearly saw that as his hand released his grip, the ice dagger in his hand had completely turned into a pile of ice shards. What? Qin Yun's pupils abruptly shrunk when he saw this scene. He was astonished in his heart. He never imagined that Xiao Yan actually had an expert by his side. However, soon after, a purple gold figure suddenly appeared behind Xiao Yan. The tall and sturdy figure was like a purple gold metal tower. His body was half a body taller than Qin Yun. From the looks of it, who else could it be other than the Northern King? At the same time the Northern King appeared, his other hand was suddenly clenched into a fist. It carried an extremely powerful force as it violently smashed toward Qin Yun's chest. Damn it! I actually forgot that there was such a thing. Qin Yun was greatly alarmed when he recognized the Northern King in front of him. He hurriedly controlled his Do Qi to form a wash-basin-sized Do Qi shield in front of him. He wanted to use this to block the Northern King's punch. Bang! Soon after, the Northern King's punch landed on the Do Qi shield. An explosive force instantly poured out. In an instant, numerous clear crack lines swiftly spread across the Do Qi shield. Qin Yun's eyes focused. He only felt that the energy that had gathered in front of his chest was rapidly scattering at this moment. The enormous Do Qi was uncontrollably compressed back into the vortex. Soon after, his body appeared to have received a heavy blow as it flew backwards with a bang. After which, it heavily smashed into the city below. In an instant, it destroyed a large number of buildings. Pooh! When Qin Yun recovered, he involuntarily spat out a mouthful of bright red blood. He raised his eyes. They were like sharp swords as they instantly locked onto the Northern King. He involuntarily cried out. 6-star Do Di. It's a late 6-star Do Di. In the sky, Xiao Yan slowly turned around. He faintly smiled as he looked at Qin Yun, who was half propping himself up in the ruins below. A cold smile surfaced in his eyes. You discovered me long ago? Qin Yun's eyes once again focused as he spoke in a deep voice. You have underestimated the spiritual strength of a rank 3 alchemist. My spiritual strength fills every corner of this battlefield. Unless your speed or spiritual strength far exceeds mine, it is impossible for you to appear behind me when I am unprepared. Xiao Yan coldly smiled. After which, he withdrew his gaze. At the same time, he slowly raised his right hand. A dazzling fire lotus slowly floated above his palm. It was the angry Buddha lotus flame. The fire lotus slowly floated and rotated in the empty space. The flame seedlings on the lotus petals appeared to be alive as they danced briskly. Following the rotation of the fire lotus, the surrounding empty space was torn apart by the flame seedlings and formed numerous clear crack lines. This kind of crack line could only be created when the Do techniques in the hands of these elite Do Di were completely unleashed. Gulp! Qin Yun's heart suddenly sank when he saw the fire lotus. The terrifying destructive aura that was emitted from it caused even him to involuntarily feel fear in his heart. He did not expect that Xiao Yan would still be able to complete the agglomeration of the fire lotus. The muscles on Qin Yun's face involuntarily twitched intensely when he thought of this. His heart trembled because of this. He did not doubt that the energy contained in this beautiful fire lotus, which looked like a piece of art, was definitely incomparably terrifying. Even among these people present, it was likely that there were not many who could block it. Moreover, even if they could, they would definitely have to pay a great price for it. He did not expect that the plan that he had designed would ultimately be destroyed by this Xiao Yan in front of him. In the end, Xiao Yan still did not die. This was quite a big problem for him. On the other side, after Han Dong sensed the situation on Xiao Yan's side, he also forcefully forced the 3 people in front of him to withdraw. This time around, they did not continue to be entangled. Instead, at the same time, they threw their solemn gazes toward where Xiao Yan was at. When they saw the dazzling fire lotus that was suspended in Xiao Yan's hand, the expressions of the 3 of them immediately became serious. Han Dong swiftly came to Xiao Yan's side. When he saw the fire lotus that was suspended in Xiao Yan's hand, even with his mental state, a shock involuntarily surfaced in his pair of turbid old eyes. It was difficult to imagine that this seemingly young black-robed young man before him was actually able to create such a frightening Do skill. In the square, the few 9-star half-emperors surrounded Xiao Yan from afar. Their gazes were firmly locked onto the wash-basin-sized fire lotus in his hand. Everyone's hearts were filled with seriousness. If they had known that this would happen, they would have spared no expense to kill Xiao Yan first. Unfortunately, they had underestimated Xiao Yan's strength. The situation that was originally in their favor was about to be turned around due to the appearance of the angry Buddha fire lotus. Set up the formation. Take out all of your formation plates. The muscles on Fan Xiyuan's old face twitched. His mouth was filled with a grave expression as he shouted out explosively. Immediately, the surrounding people from the Array Master Association began to move at this moment. Many rays of light flew out from their respective storage rings. Soon after, waves of spiritual strength were wildly poured into the formation plates that were shot out. Unfortunately, they did not have the strength to do so. Even though they were rank 3 formation masters, it was impossible for them to control so many formation plates at the same time. In addition to Fan Siyuan and the others at the front, there were nearly 300 formations that were activated in a short moment. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yan shook his head and coldly laughed. If this group of people had been prepared earlier, they might have been able to create trouble for him. However, the angry Buddha Fire Lotus had already been formed. Even if they were to create formations now, it was already too late. As the dozens of powerful formation masters on the opposite side activated their formations one after another, Xiao Yan threw the Fire Lotus in his hand forward. The beautiful Fire Lotus, which was like a piece of art, seemed to slowly draw across the empty space. However, it was pressuring their hearts every second. It was like an invisible mountain that passed through their bodies and directly collided with the bottom of their hearts, causing their hearts to tremble in fear. The flame flickered as if it was connected to the hearts of everyone present. Every time the flame flickered, the breathing of everyone present would also tremble. Their hearts were already in their throats as they were afraid that it would really burst out of their chests. When the Fire Lotus drew across the empty space, the thin line of fire was like a ray of sunlight that remained in the empty space. Everywhere it passed, there was an endless darkness. 1 inch, 2 inches, 10 feet, 20 feet. The empty space began to collapse. All the buildings in the city below were also implicated. The space around the Fire Lotus seemed to have turned into a bottomless abyss in an instant, swallowing everything within. The endless darkness seemed to be about to swallow the entire Jinyao city. Damn it! Just what kind of Do technique is this? Fan Siyuan's heart was extremely anxious. The threat that this Fire Lotus brought to him had far exceeded the pressure of an expert of the same level. He really did not dare to imagine that this kind of destructive strength was something that a 5-star Do D could achieve. It's too late. Attack and stop this damn thing. On the ground, Qin Yun involuntarily cried out. His heart was filled with fear. He did not wish to die in this place before his great undertaking was completed. However, at this moment, Xiao Yan in the sky laughed coldly. He grabbed Han Dong beside him and swiftly flew toward the rank 4 formation that covered the entire Jinyao city. The instant he turned around, a simple and icy word was spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth. Explode! Chapter 905. A frightening energy storm suddenly swept across Jinyao city the moment these words were spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth. The earth-shattering explosion resounded in the minds of everyone in the city like a thunderclap. The invisible sound wave turned into a storm and instantly destroyed the formation that the sorcerers had yet to completely condense. The sound wave directly attacked one's soul and also caused great damage to one's physical body. In the blink of an eye, everyone who was nearby fell into various degrees of pain. Their bodies convulsed and the intense pain of their souls being torn apart continuously transmitted. Their painful screams were mercilessly drowned out by the sound wave. Their eardrums exploded and blood dyed the sky. Even elite Do D were in extreme pain under the sound wave. Clang! The storm that was condensed from the sound of the explosion heavily collided with the formation that enveloped the entire Jinyao city. In an instant, the sound of a bell rang once again. The entire Jinyao city trembled violently under the violent bombardment and all the buildings in the city were destroyed. Countless half-emperors were killed or injured in an instant. Elite Do D wailed at the sky and the Do Qi in their bodies crazily surged out. Only then did they barely manage to resist the sound wave. However, the eruption of the angry Buddha lotus flame had officially begun. As the sound wave dissipated, an even more terrifying flame storm suddenly swept across the city. A terrifying high temperature that wanted to incinerate everything swept across every corner of the city. Under this terrifying high temperature, the vegetation instantly turned into nothingness. Everything in the city was rapidly melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Above the empty space, with the angry Buddha lotus flame as the center, the endless dark space continued to crack and collapse in all directions. Everything was silent in the darkness. At this moment, only those high-level Do D could barely control the situation. Damn it, what a terrifying power. If you don't want to die, attack with this old man and suppress this damn thing. After all, Fan Siyuan was the president of the Formation Master Association, and Jinyao City was his headquarters. Fan Siyuan's rallying power was undoubtedly extremely shocking. With a shout, everyone in the city immediately turned their heads. Of course, The real reason behind this might be the gorgeous fire lotus that was currently suspended in the sky. Now, everyone gather your do chi and attack that fire lotus. Remember, if you want to live, it's best not to hold back. Fan Siyuan's expression was solemn. His turbid old eyes stared intently at the flame wave that was rapidly spreading in the air not far away. The do chi in his body began to circulate wildly at this moment. At this moment, it was already too late to set up a formation. Hence, the only thing that could be used to block the fire lotus was the powerful do techniques in their hands. He formed a seal with both of his hands, and a series of mysterious seals flew out from his hands. Vigorous do chi gushed out of his body, and condensed into a golden palm in front of him. The moment the golden palm was formed, it flew forward with a majestic aura and violently smashed towards the fire lotus. Gold glorious seal! Fan Siyuan let out an explosive cry. The do chi in his body was continuously poured into the golden palm until it came into contact with the fire wave. At the same time that this golden palm flew out, numerous majestic do techniques from all over the city also shot toward the sky at this moment. It was just like the gathering of stars. These people clearly only had one target. Buddha's fiery lotus. Bang! Suddenly, the powerful flame wave violently collided with those do techniques. It was just like raindrops smashing into the surface of a lake. An earth-shaking explosion suddenly sounded. Wave after wave of frightening energy ripples immediately swept across the sky. Its strength was even more frightening than before. In an instant, other than a portion of the do techniques that were unleashed by a high-class do-di, most of the do techniques were turned into ashes by the flame wave. After the hundreds of powerful do techniques were completely destroyed, the remaining 10+ do techniques were the strongest remaining ones. Soon after, the remaining 10+ powerful do techniques also arrived in front of the fire lotus in the air following the destruction of the huge flame wave. In an instant, they had already collided. However, the earth-shaking explosion that everyone had imagined did not appear. Instead, there was a deathly silence in that endless empty space. The 10+ do techniques surrounded the beautiful fire lotus in the middle. The fire lotus was still slowly rotating. The flames on the lotus petals danced like little spirits that were still active under those powerful do techniques. Soon after, the remaining 5 petals of the fire lotus began to fall one by one, starting from the outermost layer. Layer by layer, the petals stacked together. After which, they merged and emitted a glaring firelight. What is that? In the empty space below, Fan Siyuan's eyes stared intently at the cluster of glaring firelight. However, even with his eyesight, he did not discover anything. Damn it! What exactly is this thing? Buzz buzz buzz. The glaring light became increasingly prosperous. Finally, a light pillar that connected the heavens and the earth suddenly rose and directly entered the empty space above. Soon after, the owners of the 10+ do techniques, including Fan Siyuan, clearly felt that the do techniques that they had unleashed were trembling slightly at this moment. What? It was also at this moment. Bang! Following a wave of firelight, the entire Jinyao city was filled with firelight. The light was so bright that it was even brighter than the sun. The firelight penetrated the formation that covered the entire Jinyao city. Numerous enormous crack lines swiftly filled it. Bang! At a certain moment, there was a crisp sound that sounded like glass shattering. The entire world fell silent at this moment. An instant later, an enormous energy storm suddenly swept in all directions with the angry Buddha lotus flame as the center. The frightening energy storm tore the invisible space apart layer by layer. In the blink of an eye, half of Jinyao city was covered in darkness. This was also because the few high-class do-di did their best to block it. The spreading of the energy storm continued for 15 minutes. At this moment, there were countless deaths and injuries in the enormous Jinyao city. The enormous city had been completely turned into ruins. There was even an enormous depression. Below it was an endless empty space that one could not see the bottom of. The storm that swept through the city was extremely frightening. A large group of people had also gathered outside the city because of this. However, there were very few people among these people who knew the truth of this matter. At this moment, on a mountain peak outside of Jinyao city that was completely far away from the battleground, an old man wearing a yellow robe was watching the events that were happening in Jinyao city. His pair of turbid old eyes were similarly filled with a deep solemnness. Additionally, there was a hesitation. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 906. Under the frightening energy storm within Jinyao City, even Xiao Yan, who was the owner of the city, had difficulty escaping from it. After the energy storm scattered, a painful groan was transmitted from the outer area of Jinyao City near the city gate. Two human figures, one old and one young, were standing at the foot of the city gate in a miserable manner. They were Xiao Yan and Han Dong. After being mercilessly attacked by the angry Buddha lotus flame, even the current Xiao Yan and Han Dong's condition was extremely bad. Han Dong was seriously injured within the terrifying storm. Although he was a rank 5 alchemist and had managed to block most of the attack by relying on his powerful spiritual strength, he was ultimately only a 7-star Do-D. Under the remnant force of the energy storm, Han Dong was ultimately injured by it. Han Dong was seriously injured, but Xiao Yan was in an even more dangerous situation at this moment. After forming the angry Buddha lotus flame, the Do-Chi within the latter's body had been completely exhausted. All of his strength had been exhausted the moment the fire lotus exploded. If it were not for the little remaining connection between himself and the angry Buddha lotus flame, and the heavenly flame within his body protecting him, it was likely that Xiao Yan would have difficulty surviving. At the same time, a couple of human figures flew out from the dark bottomless pit in the middle of the city on the other side. Most of these people were high-class Do-D. The weakest among them was not inferior to Han Dong. However, the condition of this group of people did not appear to be good. Like Han Dong, these people had all suffered varying degrees of injuries from the energy storm earlier. Among these people, the ones who had preserved the most strength were naturally the 6-star Do-D and 9-star Do-D from the Formation Master Association and Qin side. Of course, a large group of elite Do-D were gathered on the other side of Jinyao City outside of the battleground. These people were completely unrelated to this big battle. They had already withdrawn from the battleground when the big battle began. Even though this was the case, the frightening energy ripple that was created when the angry Buddha lotus flame exploded caused these experts to be quietly shocked in their hearts. The two leaders among these people were the chairman of the auction house, Lu Zhongtian, and the deputy chairman, Wu Gang. Over half of the energy ripple that was created when the angry Buddha lotus flame exploded was blocked by these two people. Is he really just a 5-star Do-D? Lu Zhongtian's expression was serious. His bright eyes stared at the spot where the Buddha's fiery lotus had exploded. His heart could not calm down for a long time. Wu Gang by the side also had a solemn expression. They had never seen a 5-star Do-D with such a frightening fighting strength. Although Lu Zhongtian was also able to agglomerate a Do technique of this level, the thing that caused them to be shocked was not just how frightening this Do technique was. What was even more frightening was the person who had created this Do technique. A 5-star Do-D. This point was something that even someone as strong as Lu Zhongtian would not dare to exaggerate. Would he be able to compare with this black-robed young man when he was a 5-star Do-D? Lu Zhongtian did not dare to imagine. This was the first time he had seen such a proud son of heaven after so many years of fame. He could even imagine that in a few more years, Xiao Yan's combat strength would far surpass his. When that time came, the entire western region would be shaken. There was an enormous being in the western region that was rapidly growing in an invisible manner. Unfortunately, it was too late for them to see this day. The baby eagle had already grown up and was dancing in the sky. The western region would definitely become the stage where Xiao Yan would ascend to the peak. Bang! A muffled loud sound was suddenly emitted from a pile of rubble in the city near the battleground. The remains of the building were forcefully sent flying by a barbaric strength. Soon after, a human figure flew out from within. After which, it heavily smashed onto the ground. If one were to look at it, this person was the fourth person in charge of the Formation Master Association, Cheng Zhihui. However, from the looks of the latter's current appearance, he had already become a dead person. Trash! Cough cough cough. A string of curses was emitted from the rubble that the human figure flew out from. Soon after, a miserable figure covered in blood crawled out from the rubble with great difficulty. When he lifted his head, the sunlight scattered down. The blood-stained face coupled with the ferocious expression looked extremely frightening. However, one could still recognize at a glance that this person was Qin Yun, who had failed to launch a sneak attack and was sent flying by the Northern King's punch. Qin Yun had relied on the already seriously injured Cheng Zhihui to luckily survive the energy storm. This had caused Cheng Zhihui's death and Qin Yun himself to fall into a seriously injured state. If Cheng Zhihui was not seriously injured, Qin Yun might not have ended up in such a state. A cool breeze swept across the land and scattered the dust. Everything in the city had become clear. After the angry Buddha lotus flame, at least half of the people in Jinyao City had died. The price of this battle could not be said to be not terrible. However, this was the price of war. There would never be a victor. The so-called winners were only those who continuously fled from war and luckily survived in the end. A coward in battle, a hero in the aftermath. Fan Siyuan's old face was pale as he stood in the air. His gaze swiftly swept over the city below. He did not believe that Xiao Yan would be unharmed in the energy storm from earlier. Even if he could do so, it was impossible for Han Dong, a 7-star Do D, to escape unscathed. Even he, a 9-star Do D, had been injured because of it. How could Xiao Yan be unharmed? Soon, Fan Siyuan's gaze locked onto Xiao Yan and Hualai, who were currently at the foot of the city gate. At this moment, the two of them were staggering toward the city gate. You want to leave? How can it be so easy? Fan Siyuan forcefully endured the intense pain that was transmitted from his body. A thought passed through his mind and he maneuvered the enormous Do Qi within his veins. He swiftly flew forward, planning to stop the two of them. Qi Ming and Hualai once again followed behind him. After this battle, their impression of Xiao Yan in their hearts was no longer as simple as a 5-star Do D. Who had ever seen a 5-star Do D erupt with such a terrifying strength? It was also because of this that if Xiao Yan did not die today, the latter would definitely become a great threat to their Formation Master Association in the future. Additionally, there was the Alchemist Alliance behind him. From the relationship between them, they were destined to be opponents and enemies from the very beginning. As for Yan He and the other two, they quickly returned to Qin Yun's side after their gazes surveyed the surroundings. Young master, we subordinates have failed to protect our master. Please punish us. Yan He and the other two were filled with fear as they knelt on the ground toward Qin Yun. Although Qin Yun's cultivation was inferior to theirs, the latter's methods caused them to feel fear. Today, they had failed to protect Qin Yun. Tomorrow, they might not be able to protect their heads. Forget it, this cannot be blamed on you. Now, the most important thing is to kill Xiao Yan for me. You must do it quickly, no matter what method you use. Otherwise, I will settle the old and new debts together. Qin Yun's pale face revealed an uncaring appearance. As he spoke, an extremely obscure killing intent flashed across the depths of his eyes. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 907. At this moment, a couple of human figures were gathered at the city gate of Jinyao City. Fan Siyuan and the two others once again stood in front of Xiao Yan and Han Dong. In the distance, Yan He and the two others were flying over. The expression on Han Dong's old face was grave. Xiao Yan's face was also pale. Although he had already swallowed the medicinal pill, the condition of his body did not improve much. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that there was still some Do Qi left in the vortex within his body. This was the last bit of strength that Xiao Yan had purposely preserved. Under the effect of the medicinal pill, the Do Qi within Xiao Yan's body was also slowly recovering. Xiao Yan clearly understood that although his angry Buddha lotus flame was powerful, it was unrealistic to think that it could face so many strong people at the same time. Hence, he did not think that the angry Buddha lotus flame would be able to resolve the problem this time around. He only wanted to use it to exhaust the strength of Fan Siyuan and the others. From the looks of this result, Xiao Yan had indeed succeeded. However, he had underestimated the strength that a 9-star Do D contained. The angry Buddha lotus flame had indeed caused them to suffer serious injuries. However, this was unable to completely affect the condition of a 9-star Do D. From the looks of the current situation, Xiao Yan and Han Dong seemed to have yet to withdraw from the earlier situation. They were currently facing 6 elite 9-star Do D. Damn it, I have underestimated them. Xiao Yan viciously cursed in his heart. His face was grave. It was unexpected that they had still ended up in this situation. By the side, Han Dong moved his feet and blocked Xiao Yan behind him. His gaze was piercingly cold as he looked at the three people on the opposite side. Behind him, Yan He and the two others quickly approached. Xiao Yan, I will act to stop them later. You should quickly take the opportunity to leave this place. Remember, do not turn back. Suddenly, Han Dong's voice that was filled with a grave intent was transmitted into Xiao Yan's ears. The latter's expression immediately changed. He was just about to open his mouth when Fan Siyuan and the others on the opposite side opened their mouths first. Xiao Yan, you have nowhere else to go. I advise you to allow yourself to be captured. Otherwise, once we make a move, not even your bones will remain. Hua Lai coldly sneered at Xiao Yan with a ferocious expression on his face. Killing intent was present in his words. Clearly, at this moment, the hearts of everyone present were filled with dread towards Xiao Yan. At this moment, the only way to calm their hearts was for Xiao Yan to die. As long as Xiao Yan did not die, they would not be able to rest easy. Cough, cough. Xiao Yan couldn't help but cough twice. Ignoring Han Dong's attempt to stop him, the pale-faced Xiao Yan took a step forward with a smile. His eyes were filled with a cold sneer as he swept his gaze across the people in front of him. I'm sorry, but my bones are naturally tough and I won't be threatened by anything. So, if you really want my life, I advise you to do it yourself. You're still so sharp-tongued even when you're about to die. You're really courting death. After cursing, Hua Lai did not hesitate at all. His body moved and he charged explosively towards Xiao Yan. If you want to hurt him, you'll have to get past me. Han Dong let out an explosive cry from his mouth. His expression was solemn as he flew forward. Soon after, he collided heavily with Hua Lai. Bang! The two collided. This time around, a cold smile surfaced on Hua Lai's face. His body shook and a frightening strength poured out, forcing Han Dong back with a single strike. Humph. Han Dong, a 7-star Do Di is indeed a 7-star Do Di. With just your Do Chi, you won't even be able to block a single attack from the old me. You want to protect this person who's about to die? What a fool's dream. Hua Lai laughed out loud. His body once again charged explosively forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan. His large hand grabbed forward and violently landed on Xiao Yan's head. The old me has already said that if you want to hurt him, you'll have to get past me. However, right at this moment, the complexion of Han Dong, who had been forced back by Hua Lai's attack, suddenly turned red. At the same time, a burst of powerful energy abruptly surged out from within his body. Like a flame, it rose up and lit up his entire body, making him appear like a star. Han Dong's body instantly flashed. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived beside Hua Lai. His hand was as swift as lightning as he firmly grabbed Hua Lai's wrist. Ha! With an explosive cry, Han Dong suddenly exerted some strength with the hand that he had grabbed Hua Lai's wrist, forcefully flinging the latter's body away. Hua Lai's body miserably retreated dozens of steps in the air before stabilizing his body. He raised his head and looked over. His eyes were filled with fierceness. Secret technique, huh? Insignificant skill. Let's see how long you can endure. At this moment, Yan He and the others had also arrived in front of Han Dong. The 6 9-star Do Di simultaneously looked at Han Dong. Waves of ferocious Do Chi rose from the bodies of the 6 of them. Immediately, the atmosphere in the arena became unusually tense. Xiao Yan, I will delay them now. You should leave quickly. Taking advantage of this short gap, Han Dong once again transmitted his voice to Xiao Yan. No, facing 6 9-star Do Di at the same time is really too dangerous. I cannot abandon you. I cannot leave. Even if I want to leave, we must leave together. Otherwise, little fellow, there is no need for you to say so much nonsense. As the deputy chairman of the Alchemist Alliance, they do not dare to really kill me. However, if you continue to stay here, they will definitely use all sorts of methods to kill you. Moreover, you are currently seriously injured. If you do not leave, you will only become a burden to me. I will not be able to endure this condition for long. If you want to leave, you can only do so now. Leave. Before Xiao Yan could say anything, Han Dong hurriedly interrupted him. It was also at this moment that Fan Siyuan and the others on the opposite side suddenly attacked. They planned to finish off the 2 people in front of them in one fell swoop. Damn it! Xiao Yan unwillingly cursed in his heart. Although he was extremely dissatisfied in his heart, he also understood in his heart that the current situation did not allow him to hesitate even a little. Hence, he made a ruthless decision in his heart. When Fan Siyuan and the others attacked, Xiao Yan dragged his weak body and hurriedly flew out of the city. You want to leave? Stop him. Fan Siyuan emitted an earth-shaking explosive cry. The bodies of the 2 people behind him shook. Their speed suddenly increased as they charged forward. Ha! Just as Qi Ming and Hua Lai were about to step forward, Han Dong suddenly rushed forward and used all his strength to block the two of them. On the other side, Yan He and the other two planned to bypass Fan Siyuan and the others and chase after Xiao Yan. The expression on Han Dong's face changed when he sensed the actions of Yan He and the others. Just as he was about to flash and explosively withdraw, Fan Siyuan appeared in front of him in a ghost-like manner. He threw out a palm in an attempt to block Han Dong. However, bang! Han Dong did not dodge at all. He used his body to forcefully block this attack. At the same time, with the help of this force, Han Dong's bloody body swiftly arrived in front of Yan He and the other two. He used his flesh and blood to forcefully block them. In this way, these 6 9-star Do Di were forcefully blocked in front of the city gate by Han Dong using his own body as the price. At this moment, Xiao Yan also gradually disappeared into the distance. Chapter 908. Very quickly, Xiao Yan was far away from the boundary of Jinyao City. From time to time, a muffled rumbling sound could be heard from behind him, causing Xiao Yan's heart to tremble. It was not difficult to imagine what kind of price Han Dong had paid for Xiao Yan. Using his 7-star Do Di cultivation, secret technique, and physical body, Han Dong had given Xiao Yan enough time to leave. Xiao Yan could only hope that it was just as Han Dong had said. They did not dare to kill him. Otherwise, once Han Dong died, Xiao Yan would go all out. Regardless of the price, he would definitely make those 6 9-star Do Di pay with their lives for what they had done today. Xiao Yan had never been a narrow-minded person. However, he would definitely not be stingy when it came to revenge. However, Xiao Yan's most important task now was to leave this place. Otherwise, once Fan Siyuan and the others caught up, Han Dong's hard work would be wasted. Very quickly, Xiao Yan's figure appeared in the sky above a mountain forest. Even though he could no longer see Jinyao City behind him, Xiao Yan did not plan to stop here. He needed to ensure his own safety. Otherwise, he would not be able to hide under the detection of a 9-star Do Di. Moreover, Fan Siyuan was a rank 4 formation master whose spiritual strength far surpassed his. Xiao Yan's figure slowly flew forward without stopping. The medicinal pills in his body were still healing the injuries in his body. At the same time, threads of Do Qi were slowly being poured into the vortex. This kind of feeling of not being able to make ends meet really caused Xiao Yan to feel strained. Xiao Yan, who was in a hurry to leave this place, did not realize that in the empty space far behind him, there was a human figure wearing a yellow robe quietly following him. The hand under the sleeve was tightly holding an ancient-looking scroll. The old man's hand slowly rubbed it. His scarlet tongue licked his lips. A pair of snake-like icy-cold eyes looked in the direction that Xiao Yan had left in. A greedy expression involuntarily appeared in his eyes. Although he had personally witnessed the frightening scene that caused fear to rise in one's heart, under the influence of his greedy heart, this old man still quietly followed Xiao Yan, who had safely left. "Brat, you're already heavily injured. I don't believe that you can create another fire lotus like that." Ha ha ha. 2 hours passed very quickly. At this moment, Xiao Yan, who was slowly flying forward, finally landed in the forest below. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged on the trunk of a huge tree. With a flick of his finger, he summoned the Northern King. Immediately after, Xiao Yan quickly took out 2 Class 4 medicinal pills from his storage ring and swallowed them without hesitation. Immediately, the enormous medicinal effect of a Tier 4 medicinal pill was displayed. The damaged qi paths and bones in Xiao Yan's body were swiftly recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye under this enormous medicinal strength. Of course, it was easy to recover from minor injuries. However, those injured internal organs required time to be worn in before they could slowly recover. In just a short 15 minutes, Xiao Yan's injuries had gradually stabilized. Waves of Do Qi quickly flowed through his meridians and gathered in the vortex. Xiao Yan's pale face recovered slightly. His originally weak aura also began to fill up. However, it would take a very long time for him to return to his peak. However, while Xiao Yan was focusing on recovering from the injuries within his body, a yellow-robed human figure suddenly appeared in the empty space a short distance away in a ghost-like manner. Under the yellow robe, a pair of sinister eyes covered in shadows instantly stared at Xiao Yan. Like 2 invisible arrows, they pierced through the air and appeared in front of Xiao Yan in the blink of an eye. Buzz! The Northern King, who was originally standing quietly beside Xiao Yan, suddenly took a step forward and used its body to block Xiao Yan. The 2 invisible arrows collided with the Northern King's chest, which was filled with a metallic texture. The invisible arrows left 2 shallow dents on the Northern King's chest, which quickly recovered. At the same time, the Northern King's cold and empty gaze landed on the yellow-robed man. What a strange puppet. Under the yellow robe, the sinister old eyes stared intently at the Northern King. He could not help but feel astonished. At this moment, Xiao Yan, who was behind the Northern King, had already exited from his training state. He continued to refine the pills in his body as his pitch-black eyes looked at the yellow-robed figure in the sky. May I know who you are? I don't think we have met before. Xiao Yan's gaze swept over the yellow-robed figure. He was immediately certain that this person was not from the Array Master Association. Haha, indeed. It is as you have said. We have never met before. Under the yellow robe, a slightly hoarse old voice slowly spat out. There was even a trace of mockery in his voice. Since we have never met before, why have you appeared now? Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes. A trace of seriousness surged in his heart. It could be said that he had just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. He did not expect that there would be someone who would target him. With a thought, the dou qi that had barely recovered from the vortex in his body began to circulate. Even though he was seriously injured, Xiao Yan could still determine the cultivation of the person in front of him by relying on his remaining spiritual strength. An advanced 8-star dou di. With such strength, he was not inferior to Wu Jitian of the battle martial sect. From the looks of it, this person's cultivation was not that of a 9-star dou di. However, when placed among the high-class dou di, he could be considered an extremely troublesome existence. Mister, do you still remember that you had won a dragon scale fruit in the auction house? Under the yellow robe, the old man's somewhat deep voice was transmitted over. Once these words were spoken, Xiao Yan immediately frowned. The scene from back then surfaced in his mind. Indeed, Xiao Yan had successfully won the dragon scale fruit with 10 bottles of icy spirit cold liquid. However, because of this, he had offended the faction in the private room. It turned out that it was this yellow-robed old man in front of him. You are here for the dragon scale fruit? I was before, but not now, the yellow-robed old man sneered and said. Or rather, it is not just for the dragon scale fruit. The moment his words sounded, the old man's pair of shady old eyes instantly lifted. His gaze was like a sharp arrow as it stared at Xiao Yan. The greed in his eyes was not concealed at all. Dragon scale fruit? You mean this? After hesitating for a while, Xiao Yan still took out a jade box. After opening it, an oval-shaped fruit was exposed to the air. It was the dragon scale fruit. The moment he saw the dragon scale fruit, the expression on the yellow-robed old man's face could not help but change. He quickly extended his shriveled hand and greedily stared at the fruit in Xiao Yan's hand. His tone was dense as he ordered, Kid, hand it over and I will let you die a quick death. Who said I was going to hand it over to you? Xiao Yan sneered. He took out the dragon scale fruit, but he did not intend to hand it over to the yellow-robed old man. Kid, I saw the previous battle. The combat power that you possess is something that I have never seen in my life. I have to say, if you were at your peak, I would not dare to attack you. However, it is better for you to see clearly now. With your severely injured body, do you think that you have the ability to defend it? The yellow-robed old man first praised with a solemn expression, but then he sneered sarcastically. Or do you intend to use it to threaten me? You can try. I guarantee that you will die miserably. The yellow-robed old man slowly clenched his outstretched hand. The invisible space between his palms constantly distorted. Then with a bang, it collapsed and turned into an endless darkness. Hearing the old man's words, Xiao Yan sneered. His gaze returned to the dragon scale fruit in front of him, and his heart was filled with determination. Seeing that you want this dragon scale fruit so much, I think that you should also be a physical body cultivator, right? So what? The yellow-robed old man frowned. He could not help but feel that something was wrong. Since that is the case, let me see which one of us has the better physical strength. A cold cry was emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth. Soon after, Xiao Yan grabbed the dragon scale fruit in front of him in front of the yellow-robed old man's disbelieving eyes. He widened his mouth and forcefully swallowed it. Chapter 909. The instant the dragon scale fruit entered his mouth, it turned into an enormous fiery energy that followed Xiao Yan's throat and surged into the latter's body in one go. Bang! On the tree branch, Xiao Yan's body shook uncontrollably. In an instant, a frightening heat wave attacked. The mountain forest within 1,000 feet radius was flattened in an instant. At the same time, a painful roar was emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth. The roar was just like thunder that shook the sky and earth, causing the magical beasts in the mountain forest to scatter in all directions in fear. At this moment, even with the strength of the yellow-robed old man, his expression involuntarily changed. The dou qi in his body surged out and blocked the frightening heat wave. After which, he threw his solemn gaze toward the latter. His eyes contained a deep disbelief. No matter how he thought about it, he did not expect Xiao Yan in front of him to crazily swallow the dragon scale fruit. It should be known that the dragon scale fruit contained the strength of an ancient dragon. Even at his peak, he could only rely on external strength to slowly refine it. The result of swallowing it in one go was unimaginable. This lunatic! What is the difference between this method and self-destruction? Damn it! I should not have given him the chance to speak. At this moment, the heart of the yellow-robed old man was filled with regret. If he could turn back time, he would definitely kill Xiao Yan at the first possible moment. Unfortunately, it was already too late to think about this now. The frightening energy moved in all directions within Xiao Yan's body. The enormous energy seemed to have a purpose as it surged into every cell in Xiao Yan's body. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yan's body swelled by more than a couple of times. His entire body appeared to be scarlet red in color, as though it had been burned. His swollen body appeared to be transparent. One could even see the unceasingly flowing blood under his skin. However, at this moment, even the blood appeared to be boiling. Xiao Yan's face revealed a painful expression. His body was bright red and the expression on his face appeared to be crazy. The roars that were emitted from his mouth were almost hoarse in the end. His originally dark black eyes had become scarlet red at this moment. Both of his eyes were extremely wide and his perfectly round eyeballs appeared to be about to fall out of their sockets, causing a chill to rise in one's heart upon seeing them. The enormous energy moved wildly within his body, passing through his flesh, organs and bones, completely occupying every inch of Xiao Yan's body. Even so, Xiao Yan's body continued to swell, as though it could explode at any moment. Roar! Until a certain moment, Xiao Yan's throat once again emitted a beast-like roar. His swollen palms suddenly clenched tightly and his mind forcefully controlled his body. His enormous body suddenly shook and behind him, a slightly illusory figure suddenly rose from the ground, reaching a height of 100 feet. It was the Force Elephant skill. When the illusory figure was formed, the enormous energy within Xiao Yan's body seemed to have found a place to return to. It violently poured out and entered the illusory figure behind Xiao Yan. In an instant, the originally illusory figure rapidly solidified. A fiery red color filled his entire body and the enormous energy continued to pour in. The figure that was formed by the Force Elephant skill once again swelled under this enormous energy. At this moment, Xiao Yan's heart was filled with horror as he realized that even the Force Elephant skill was unable to withstand this enormous energy. Even the Force Elephant skill was about to explode from this energy. At that time, once the Force Elephant skill exploded, the damage would be directly reflected on Xiao Yan's body. Then one could imagine the outcome. At this moment, Xiao Yan's heart was filled with fear. He did not expect that the dragon scale fruit would actually possess such a terrifying energy. Now, it seemed that he would inevitably die under this enormous energy. Damn it, how could this be? Xiao Yan's heart was filled with unwillingness as he roared furiously. However, the situation had already reached an irreversible state. Even if he tried his best, he would still be unable to control this energy. As for the yellow-robed elder, he had hidden far away. In the face of such an enormous energy, even he did not dare to casually face it. Hence, he could only observe Xiao Yan's situation from afar. He hoped that after the latter exploded, there would still be some valuable things left behind. However, it was a pity that his wish was destined to not be fulfilled. Just when Xiao Yan felt that he was no longer able to endure this strength, the dragon phoenix bloodline that belonged to the ancient void dragon tribe within his body was suddenly awakened at this moment. Ha! In an instant, Xiao Yan let out an earth-shattering dragon roar towards the sky, causing all the magical beasts in the forest to submit to him. In this roar, these magical beasts could clearly feel a pressure from the bloodline. This kind of pressure caused them to be unable to have the slightest intention to resist. It was as if with a single thought, he could control their life and death. This was an absolute power, an absolute deterrence, and a symbol of status. At the same time in the sky, the yellow-robed elder's eyes suddenly narrowed as he stared at Xiao Yan. He could not help but feel shocked. At this moment, on Xiao Yan's body, purple gold dragon scales rapidly covered the latter's body. His hands turned into dragon claws, and the purple gold dragon scales covered Xiao Yan's earlobes. The dragon scales all over Xiao Yan's body emitted a special purple light, and the dragon phoenix bloodline in his body seemed to have come alive at this moment. It turned into purple gold blood dragons and rapidly flowed in the blood vessels in Xiao Yan's body. An enormous suction force surged out of the bodies of these blood dragons. In an instant, the remaining portion of the frightening strength that the dragon scale fruit had given Xiao Yan was completely absorbed by them. After absorbing the power of the dragon scale fruit, the dragon phoenix bloodline seemed to have become even more powerful. The dragon roars became even more majestic and domineering. Xiao Yan's huge body, which had swelled up because of the energy, also returned to its original size in an instant. The dragon scales that covered Xiao Yan's entire body were hidden. When one looked at the wounds on Xiao Yan's body, they had completely recovered. Although the injuries within his body were still present, for some unknown reason, the recovery speed of his body had clearly increased significantly after he swallowed the dragon scale fruit in this manner. Although his injuries still appeared serious, the current Xiao Yan was no longer the least bit worried. Other than that, there was another thing that made Xiao Yan feel pleasantly surprised. Under the scouring of the terrifying power earlier, the Force Elephant skill had condensed into a physical body in an instant. This also meant that Xiao Yan's Force Elephant skill had now reached the advanced stage. Although the Do Qi in Xiao Yan's body was weak, the advanced stage of the Force Elephant skill allowed Xiao Yan to feel a kind of strength that did not rely on Do Qi. He only felt that his entire body was filled with power at this moment. This kind of power made him overly excited, so he urgently needed to vent it. In the void, Xiao Yan stood upright. His pale face was filled with a confident smile. His gaze fell and stared at the yellow-robed elder. His heart was filled with ridicule. Previously, this fellow had repeatedly said that he wanted to kill him. Now, Xiao Yan felt curious. If the two of them were to fight, how many rounds could this yellow-robed elder in front of him last? Xiao Yan coldly laughed in his heart. Immediately, his feet suddenly stepped on empty air. His seemingly weak body was like a cannonball as it charged toward the yellow-robed old man, whose face was filled with disbelief, with a lightning-like speed. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 9-10. In the sky above the dilapidated mountain forest, a lightning-like human figure was charging toward a yellow-robed old man in the sky. The invisible space became distorted wherever the human figure passed. After which, it was unable to withstand the pressure and collapsed with a muffled, bang sound. Under the precondition that he did not use any Do Qi, the strength that erupted from his body was actually this frightening. This kind of power was truly shocking. At this moment, even the yellow-robed old man felt shocked in his heart when he saw this scene. The expression on his old face was extremely solemn. Threads of cold sweat were uncontrollably being emitted from all over his body. The heart of the yellow-robed old man involuntarily trembled when Xiao Yan emitted that earth-shaking dragon roar from his mouth. His heart was involuntarily terrified. Was the person in front of him really a human? How could a human's body endure such a frightening strength? How could he emit a dragon roar? That was the symbol of the dragon race. Just who was this black-robed young man? Although there were many questions in his heart, the yellow-robed old man did not have the time to care about them at this moment. Xiao Yan had already attacked. If he did not retaliate, he would become a laughingstock. Why would an advanced 8-star Do Di be afraid of a seriously injured 5-star Do Di? Even if Xiao Yan had the increase in strength from swallowing the dragon scale fruit, the yellow-robed old man did not think that he would lose in the face of the strength of an 8-star Do Di. Moreover, other than being an 8-star Do Di, the yellow-robed old man was also a physical body practitioner. In terms of physical strength, even if it could not be compared to the current Xiao Yan, he would not be afraid of the former. Brat, let the old me see just how much strength this strange body of yours can unleash after swallowing the dragon scale fruit. The yellow-robed old man's face was arrogant as he watched Xiao Yan charge over explosively. The Do Qi within his body crazily surged out at the same time as the explosive cry sounded from his mouth. It agglomerated into a reddish-yellow Do Qi armor. After doing all this, the old man swiftly raised his hands to his chest. His 10 fingers moved together and formed a seal. Soon after, He let out a long roar toward the sky. Ha! Half-step savage beast formula. Along with this long howl, a formless and terrifying force rapidly condensed on the surface of the old man's body. The formless energy continued to converge, as if it was material. At a glance, it looked like a barbaric bear. However, the barbaric bear could only cover the left half of the old man's body. Perhaps, this was what he meant by half-step. Roar! As the barbarian beast skill was displayed, the half-a-barbarian bear on the surface of the old man's body also emitted a beast roar that was filled with a murderous aura. Immediately, the old man's body suddenly moved as the black-colored human figure in front of him grew increasingly closer. His feet heavily stepped on empty air. Soon after, he abruptly charged forward explosively and heavily collided with the black figure that was heading towards him. Boom! Terrifying energy ripples spread out from the center of the two of them, instantly washing away the wind and clouds in this area. The two of them did not give way to each other. Their imposing auras were surging. Their powerful Do Qi and physical strength were actually equally matched against Xiao Yan's pure violence. Both sides were actually equally matched in this strike. This fellow's physical strength has actually already reached such a powerful stage. The yellow-robed old man's eyebrows were tightly knit together. A solemn expression involuntarily appeared on his old face. Such a powerful physical strength was really unbelievable. Brat, is this all you have? Although his heart was solemn, the yellow-robed old man's mouth did not give way. At the same time, the strength on his hands that were thrown forward became even more ferocious, as if he wanted to force Xiao Yan back. It is still uncertain how much strength I have. However, your strength should only be this much. Xiao Yan coldly laughed when he heard this. The expression on his face instantly became stern. The moment the strength in the yellow-robed old man's hands soared, his tightly clenched fists suddenly shook. Two enormous forces immediately surged into his palms. A frightening force poured out and easily destroyed the strength that the yellow-robed old man had just agglomerated in his palms with an unstoppable force. Bang! Soon after, a muffled bang sound was once again emitted between the two of them. The yellow-robed old man's body flew back uncontrollably until he was 1,000 feet away. Only then did he miserably stop his body. A mouthful of fresh blood was involuntarily spat out from his mouth. The old man raised his head. Both of his eyes were filled with horror. It was difficult to imagine that this Xiao Yan in front of him was actually this powerful in front of his advanced 8-star Do Di. He was actually no match for such a fighting strength. How is this possible? On the other side, Xiao Yan was currently standing proudly in the empty air. His entire body was overflowing with fighting intent. The turbulent and surging force within his body continued to spread outwards, attacking the originally calm empty space around him. Circular spatial ripples spread around Xiao Yan's body one after another. His powerful physical strength caused this unmoving, invisible empty space to tremble. After swallowing the dragon scale fruit, the strength of the current Xiao Yan's physical body had already greatly increased. Under the cleansing of the dragon scale fruit, the strength of Xiao Yan's physical body had already reached the limit that he could endure. Adding this to his complete mastery of the strength elephant skill, the combination of the two caused Xiao Yan's physical body to reach a frightening level that was difficult to imagine. Such a physical body was already not inferior to an ordinary 9-star Do Di. Even in the entire western region, there were very few people who could match the strength that this seemingly frail body possessed. An 8-star Do Di is only a zo. Xiao Yan coldly laughed. The amplification effect that the strength elephant skill had given him was much greater than he had imagined. Originally, he had thought that even if he mastered the strength elephant skill, it would at the very most raise his fighting strength to an advanced 8-star Do Di. However, he did not expect that it would actually forcefully reach the initial 9-star Do Di level. Perhaps, this was all thanks to the effect of the dragon scale fruit. Under the impact of the powerful strength of the dragon scale fruit, the force elephant skill had once again soared to its greatest extent. Perhaps it was because of this that Xiao Yan's fighting strength had soared to such an extent. Brat, don't be too arrogant. So what if you have swallowed the dragon scale fruit? If you continue to endure for such a long time with your seriously injured body, the injuries in your body will only pile up. You are digging your own grave. Haha, you know that I have swallowed the dragon scale fruit. Don't tell me that you don't know what kind of changes have occurred to my body? Xiao Yan parted his mouth and laughed coldly in the face of the yellow-robed old man's furious cry. His words were filled with disdain. Such a lowly method was really unsightly. Ugh! The yellow-robed old man's eyes immediately hardened when the words from Xiao Yan's mouth sounded. The expression on his face was clearly startled. Soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and the muscles on the corner of his eyes twitched intensely. Damn it! So what if this is the case? A 5-star Do-D is a 5-star Do-D. In front of an 8-star Do-D, he is merely an ant. The yellow-robed old man emitted an unwilling roar. He did not believe that with his 8-star Do-D's cultivation, he would not be able to finish off a seriously injured 5-star Do-D. If news of this were to spread, how would he have the face to mingle in the western region in the future? Brat, the old me does not believe that without Do-Chi, you will be able to withstand the old me's Do technique with just this physical body of yours. The old man's heart was furious. The Do-Chi in his body surged out without any restraint. His hands swiftly formed a seal. Immediately, his body flashed a couple of times and arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Both of his hands flipped and turned into palms. They violently landed on Xiao Yan's chest from the left and right. Faced with such a sharp attack from the yellow-robed old man, Xiao Yan did not withdraw. Instead, he advanced. Both of his hands clenched into fists and his body suddenly shook. An invisible force agglomerated on the surface of his body and formed a somewhat illusionary barrier. At the same time, both of his fists were waved and collided head-on with the yellow-robed old man's Do technique. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of an intense collision repeatedly reverberated through the empty space. Xiao Yan and the yellow-robed old man exchanged blows. Fist against fist, palm against palm. Earth-shaking explosions repeatedly reverberated through the empty space, causing the invisible space to crack and collapse time and time again. However, the battle between the two of them did not reveal a victor even after a long time had passed. Until a certain moment. Bang! Xiao Yan and the yellow-robed old man each threw a punch at each other's chest. The powerful Do technique shattered the invisible barrier on the surface of Xiao Yan's body. After which, it landed on Xiao Yan's chest without any reduction in power. At the same time, Xiao Yan's punch that was filled with power also violently attacked the Do technique armor on the surface of the old man's body. The same scene then appeared. The yellow-robed old man's eyes were filled with anger. The fist that landed on Xiao Yan's chest suddenly shook. Surging Do Chi immediately gushed out from his palm, wanting to force Xiao Yan back with one blow. However, buzz buzz buzz. After the surging Do Chi energy bombarded Xiao Yan's body, it only set off an intense Do Chi ripple on the surface of Xiao Yan's body. The yellow-robed old man's Do Chi was actually forcefully dissolved by Xiao Yan using the force elephant tactic. What? This brat's physical body is actually... Seeing this scene, the yellow-robed old man's heart violently trembled. The shock that Xiao Yan gave him was too much. Hee, let me do it. Xiao Yan coldly smiled. The arm that he had thrown out suddenly shook. A terrifying huge force suddenly poured out from his arm. It was like the Yellow River bursting a dam as it violently bombarded the yellow-robed old man's chest. Bang! Following a low and deep explosive bang sound, the clothes in front of the yellow-robed old man's chest instantly turned into fragments. His pupils abruptly shrunk to the size of a needle tip. His old face turned completely red as fresh blood involuntarily spat out from his mouth. His body also bent backwards in an instant. Soon after, he flew backwards like a cannonball with a bang sound. On the spot, Xiao Yan withdrew his fist with a cold smile on his face. He gently twisted his wrist with one hand with a satisfied expression on his face. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 9-11. This place was a mountain forest that had been destroyed by the powerful energy. At a glance, gullies were everywhere and the ground was full of scars. One could even clearly see the huge impact of the energy attack from the traces on the ground. It was simply shocking. At this moment, in the ruins, an old man who was covered in blood and had an extremely unstable aura was lying in a huge pit. From his position, this pit seemed to have been caused by the powerful energy that had spread from his body after he had fallen. After being hit by such a shocking power, this old man was actually able to survive. Just this point alone was shocking. Cough, cough, cough. How is this possible? No matter how strong one's physical body is, it is impossible to be so strong. This old man has bitterly trained his physical body for 100 years and has never reached such a level. How is it possible for a young brat like you? The old man climbed up from the ground in a sorry state. He raised his head and looked at the sky. He stretched out a trembling finger and pointed at the blurry black figure in the sky. His voice was trembling and hoarse as he spoke. Ah! High up in the sky under the sunlight, it was impossible to see the expression on the man's face. However, one could hear some ridicule in his voice. It seems that you've truly lived a dog's life for the past 100 years. The strength of the physical body is not something that can be proven by mere time. Even if it's only been 100 years, if you don't train and rely on external items, it's simply impossible for you to become truly powerful. Soon after, a cold laugh was heard. The figure in the sky tilted his body slightly. Under the sunlight, a young face was reflected. It was Xiao Yan. Bastard! You are just a young brat. What qualifications do you have to judge this old man? Bang! This is my qualification, Yi Futian said. Just as the old man's words sounded, Xiao Yan's right hand suddenly clenched in the air. A terrifying force immediately poured out. Almost at the same time, the invisible space within a few feet of his hand suddenly collapsed. A powerful strength possessed the right to speak at any time. Xiao Yan was clearly aware of this point. At this moment, this move of his had instantly suppressed the old man below, who had originally wanted to retort. Cold sweat involuntarily surged out from the old man's forehead. He panted intensely as he once again looked at Xiao Yan with eyes that were filled with fury. Brat, the old me admits that you are indeed the strongest OD that the old me has ever seen in my life. If you are allowed to continue growing like this, I believe that in less than 3 years, even that old thief Lu Zhongtian will be trampled under your feet. The muscles at the corner of the old man's eyes twitched slightly. His 2 hands, which were exposed, were slowly clenched tightly. It was as though he was suppressing the pain in his body. At the same time, the dou qi in his body also swiftly surged. However, no matter what, you will definitely die in my hands today. The moment the words left his mouth, the expression on the old man's face suddenly became awe-inspiring. He quickly raised his 2 withered palms to his chest, and his 10 fingers moved together, changing seals. As the old man's fingertips formed the seals, numerous unfamiliar and complicated seals were swiftly formed from his hands. At the same time, an enormous dou qi energy swiftly agglomerated in the empty space above the old man's head. It faintly formed a somewhat illusionary finger. Brat, since you have swallowed the dragon scale fruit, you should also give it a try. This dou technique that the old me had similarly obtained from this auction. Let's see just who is stronger between the 2 of us. The originally invisible finger gradually became angular and clear. The outline of an enormous finger also became increasingly clear. At the same time, an extremely ancient and enormous pressure was emitted from it, causing people to feel an enormous pressure assaulting them head-on. Spirit Class High-Level Dou Technique. Desolation Finger. The old man's mouth once again emitted an explosive cry. Almost at the same time as the cry from his mouth sounded, the enormous finger that was suspended above his head emitted an extremely dazzling green glow. A frightening force spread out like floodwater. The atmosphere between the sky and the earth once again became solemn in an instant. Such an enormous strength was something that even the current Xiao Yan could not help but feel moved when he saw it. Desolation Finger. So the person who had obtained it is you. Seeing this enormous green finger, Xiao Yan immediately recalled the mysterious strong person who had obtained it in the auction back then. At that time, he had taken out an E-class Dou technique. The appearance of that thing had caused everyone present to be shocked. However, this fellow clearly understood in his heart that it was useless for him to keep a water affinity Dou technique. Thus, he might as well use it to auction off something that he needed. This desolation finger was exactly what he wanted. After using a week's time, although he did not dare to say that he completely understood it, he was able to display 30% of its strength with his ability. Xiao Yan's gaze focused on this enormous green finger. As he sensed the powerful force that spread out from it, a solemn expression finally appeared on his face. Although this old fellow had yet to comprehend the essence of the desolation finger, this was after all a spirit class high-level Dou technique. Its body was extremely extraordinary. Just this point alone was sufficient for Xiao Yan to pay attention to it. Currently, the dou qi in his body had not recovered by much. It was still insufficient for him to use the 7-layer sky-breaking ruler. Moreover, the dou technique that he could use with his physical strength was merely the octane blast. It was far from enough to block this desolation finger. From the looks of it, he could only rely on brute force to forcefully resist. Thinking of this, Xiao Yan's heart involuntarily moved slightly. However, it was also at this moment that the enormous finger suddenly charged toward Xiao Yan. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yan inhaled a deep breath of air and allowed his heart to completely calm down. Both of his hands were slowly raised. After which, as his thoughts moved, numerous complicated seals were formed at lightning speed. At the same time, the vast and frightening force in his body also appeared to have received a command at this moment as it swiftly agglomerated. A cool breeze blew over and caused the black robe that Xiao Yan was wearing to flutter, revealing his skinny yet muscular body. At this moment, as the frightening force in Xiao Yan's body began to agglomerate, a thin layer of golden light gradually agglomerated on Xiao Yan's chest. That thin layer of light was like a thin veil that covered the surface of Xiao Yan's body. At the same time, one could clearly see that every piece of skin and every piece of muscle on Xiao Yan's body had become tense at this moment. Following the cover of the thin veil, a metallic luster was reflected. Without relying on Do Qi, Xiao Yan relied on the enormous force in his body to agglomerate a layer of substance like thin veil. This was also the only defense that he was currently using to face the Desolation Finger. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 9-12. In the distant sky, one could see a huge green finger charging up into the sky. Intense spatial ripples continued to spread from the green finger's body. It was like the surface of a lake where a huge rock had been thrown in, causing circular ripples to form. A shocking aura spread out from the finger. That kind of terrifying strength was like a volcanic eruption, filled with a destructive power. It seemed that it would only stop when everything in front of it was destroyed. Hurricanes swept across the sky and surrounded this huge green finger. At this moment, a human figure wearing a golden veil was standing in front of this huge finger. If one were to look carefully, it turned out that this human figure was not wearing a golden veil. Instead, there was a layer of faint golden light covering the surface of his body. The golden light dyed his entire body a golden color. Looking from a distance, he looked like a man made of gold, giving off an indestructible feeling. However, at this moment, there was no doubt that the target of this huge green finger was the human figure in front of him. On the ground below, the old man could not help but feel surprised when he saw Xiao Yan in the sky reveal such an appearance. With just this layer of faint golden light, could it be that Xiao Yan wanted to rely on it to block his Mi Huang finger? Although he did not dare to believe it in his heart, the old man also understood that from the strength that Xiao Yan had displayed, the latter was not the kind of person who would put on a brave front. Since he was able to rely on such a thin layer of golden veil to block his attack, it meant that this golden veil, which seemed to be easily shattered with one strike, was not as simple as it appeared to be on the surface. Thinking of this point in his heart, the old man immediately calmed down. With a thought, all of his remaining Do Qi was poured into the huge green finger in the sky. A dazzling green light was immediately emitted, illuminating the entire place with a green color. At this moment, this green finger already contained all of the Do Qi in his body. After this attack, regardless of whether it was a success or failure, he would definitely enter a state where his Do Qi was exhausted. The Mi Huang finger would decide who would stand in the end between him and Xiao Yan. In the sky, the huge green finger was getting closer and closer to Xiao Yan. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of the latter. At this moment, the distance between the two was less than 1 meter. Xiao Yan and the old man's nerves were also extremely tense at this moment. Finally, when the huge green finger was about to arrive, Xiao Yan suddenly raised both of his arms and crossed them in front of his chest. The force in his body crazily gathered. Following this, the two collided. Bang! An earth-shattering sound suddenly resounded. A terrifying energy storm instantly swept out. The forest collapsed and burned to the ground. Close to 1,000 li of forest was razed to the ground. One could see the big picture through a narrow window. The terror of a Ling-class Do technique was displayed at this moment. In the sky, a dense green Do Qi wave covered a large area of the sky. The energy within it continued to explode. A thunder-like explosion sounded repeatedly in this area. Only after a long while did this area once again return to silence. Cough cough, is it over? On the ground, the pale-faced old man climbed up from the ground with great difficulty. His mouth panted intensely as he hurriedly raised his head. His gaze searched the heavy green cloud. After he confirmed that there was no aura fluctuation there, he finally sighed in relief in his heart. His old face involuntarily revealed a smile as though he had just survived a calamity after a bitter victory. In this way, the final result was still buzz. Suddenly, an intense trembling sound appeared in the sky. On the ground, the old man's eyes suddenly hardened. The smile that had just surfaced on his face gradually froze at this moment. It was as though something had exploded deep within his heart. The expression on his pale old face gradually turned gray. High up in the sky, the green energy mist was swept away by a powerful gust of wind. The energy that had yet to disperse was completely dissolved, disappearing into the world. Subsequently, a human figure covered in a purple-gold color was exposed in the air. Looking at his face, he was undoubtedly Xiao Yan. The purple-gold light that covered Xiao Yan's body was the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor. However, from the looks of it at this moment, even with the protection of the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor, the Mi Huang finger had still left quite a number of injuries on Xiao Yan's body. A large piece of the scale armor in front of his chest had been forcefully torn off. The flesh under it was also exposed to the air. At a glance, he appeared extremely miserable. However, upon thinking about it, Xiao Yan had merely suffered some superficial wounds under the attack of a high-level spirit dough technique. Just this point alone was sufficient to make Xiao Yan feel proud. However, under the recovery of the heavenly flame, and the frightening recovery ability that he had obtained after swallowing the dragon scale fruit, the wounds on Xiao Yan's chest were swiftly recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Looking at Xiao Yan's slightly pale face, it was also gradually recovering. Of course, the only thing that did not change was that the muscles on the corner of his mouth were still twitching involuntarily. Although his recovery ability had become much stronger, the intense pain that was transmitted from his wounds was still unbearable. After recovering, Xiao Yan's eyes lowered and looked at the old man whose aura was currently extremely weak. Why? This time around, the expression on the old man's face did not fluctuate much. All the hope and begging in his heart had also disappeared at this moment. Being an 8-star Do-D, the peak expert of the Western region, he had already lost everything today. Moreover, all of this had been caused by him. From the very beginning, he should not have come to look for this black-robed, young man who appeared to be seriously injured. After descending, Xiao Yan walked step by step toward the old man. When he arrived in front of him, the injuries on his chest had already completely recovered. A thought passed through his heart and the purple-gold scale armor all over his body disappeared in the blink of an eye. Soon after, a golden illusory figure suddenly rose behind him. The golden-colored illusory figure was a huge god standing behind Xiao Yan. A layer of faint golden light was emitted from it. It was the same as the thin golden veil that had covered Xiao Yan's body earlier. However, the golden light on this illusory figure was much dimmer. Perhaps it was due to the difference in size, but the golden light on this illusory figure was much dimmer. So, it is actually like this. The old man's aura was weak as he nodded. Immediately, he fell to the ground with a loud bang. After which, Xiao Yan smiled indifferently. He turned his head to look at the golden illusory figure behind him. A thought passed through his heart and he withdrew it. This golden illusory figure was one of the 4 Saint Manifestation skill, which was known for its defense, Golden Elephant skill. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 913. In a mountain range that was rarely visited by humans, a human figure swiftly fell from the sky in front of a huge cave. After which, he landed heavily on the ground. Although his figure appeared a little miserable, his strength was also terrifyingly powerful. The ground where he landed formed a huge pit. At the bottom of the pit, a human figure wearing a black robe was half kneeling. Only after the frightening force on his body was removed did the human figure stand up while panting. Roar! Human, leave this place. Just as the human figure stood up, a huge beast roar that was filled with enmity was transmitted from deep within the cave in front of him. The roar was like thunder as it rolled over. It blew up a thick cloud of dust that swept toward the human figure in the pit. Hoo! Just as the cloud of dust was about to attack, a cool breeze suddenly rose around the human figure. It swept the cloud of dust into the air and agglomerated into the shape of a long dragon that suddenly exploded in the distance. The human figure lifted his face. A pair of dark black eyes looked toward the deepest part of the cave. His gaze was calm. Xiao Yan's pale face carried an exhausted expression. After the repeated big battles, his body's recovery ability had increased significantly. However, the great exhaustion of his Do Qi and physical strength had caused Xiao Yan to descend into a weak state. Now, he urgently needed to find a quiet place to recover. However, before this, he needed to retrieve something. His footsteps did not pause as Xiao Yan walked directly toward the interior of the cave. Within it, the magical beast that had let out a furious roar was also angered by Xiao Yan's actions. Insignificant human, you actually dare to be presumptuous here. You are seeking death. A rough and heavy beast roar was transmitted from deep within the cave. Soon after, a fierce Do Chi wave surged out from deep within the cave. Xiao Yan directly ignored it. His black robe did not move and his footsteps were as steady as usual. Soon after, an enormous beast appeared in front of Xiao Yan with heavy footsteps. Swoosh! However, without waiting for the enormous beast to do anything, Xiao Yan flicked his finger. A purple gold figure immediately shot out. It was as steady as a cannonball as it forced the enormous beast back. Boom! With a loud bang, the mountain above Xiao Yan's head suddenly shook violently. The huge body of the giant beast was actually deeply smashed into the mountain. Bang 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 bang. Immediately after, a few more explosive sounds rang out. It sounded like fists hitting flesh, and the dull sound of collision made people feel a burst of pain. Amidst the muffled collisions, miserable roars could be heard. From this, one could tell how much pain the giant beast was in. With a thought, the sounds of collisions in the depths of the cave finally stopped. Then, there was the sound of rushing wind, and the Northern King quickly returned to Xiao Yan's side. Xiao Yan's footsteps did not stop. Only when he arrived at the side of the huge beast did he stop. He turned his head to take a look. At this moment, the huge beast was embedded into the mountain with its body covered in wounds. Soft painful cries repeatedly sounded. It's just a superficial wound. He won't die, right? Xiao Yan's expression was indifferent as he spoke in a flat tone. Hearing this, the giant beast's body couldn't help but tremble. Although the voice sounded harmless, after seeing how powerful the Northern King was, it was terrified. The giant beast's body gradually shrank. Then, it turned into the appearance of a middle-aged man. However, the man's face was bruised and swollen. He lowered his head, not daring to look at the person in front of him. My lord, I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please. All right, I don't want to waste my breath with you. If you want to live, then go out and stand guard. Don't let anyone come near. Also, I'll borrow your muscle cleansing powder. After quickly instructing, Xiao Yan entered the depths of the cave without any hesitation. When the middle-aged man heard Xiao Yan's words, he stood there in a daze for a long while. His heart instantly sank. However, in the end, under Xiao Yan's powerful pressure, he left the cave with a heart full of grievances. However, he didn't dare to escape alone, so he could only obediently stand guard at the entrance. He was helpless. First, someone had barged into his cave, then he was beaten up for no reason. Now, he was even asking for his things. Who could accept such a thing? If it weren't for the fact that the other party's strength was suppressing him, he would have fought with his life on the line. However, for the sake of survival, he endured it in the end. Life was like this. Painful blows would always appear in front of you at the most unexpected moment. You wouldn't be able to make any preparations. However, this was the price of survival. In the depths of the cave, Xiao Yan directly came to a seemingly inconspicuous giant rock in the cave. He ordered the Northern King to move the giant rock away. Immediately, a giant stone pool appeared in front of Xiao Yan. Within the stone pool, there was a pile of white powder that looked like lime. As the giant rock was moved away, a strange smell wafted out from within. Smelling the strange smell in the air, Xiao Yan's face didn't reveal any strange expression. Instead, a tinge of surprise flashed across the depths of his eyes. This muscle cleansing powder was much more than what he had expected. As such, it was sufficient for his needs. After the repeated big battles, Xiao Yan's fighting strength might have risen quite a lot during this process, but the injuries all over his body were extremely shocking. Forget about the external injuries, but the damage to his internal organs required a period of time to recover. Other than this, the chi paths in Xiao Yan's body had also suffered quite a great amount of damage during the big battle earlier. This was not something that could be easily recovered by relying on his body's recovery ability alone. Xiao Yan might have some medicinal pills that could repair his chi paths, but due to the tier being too low, they could not be of any use. Hence, he had come all the way to this place. Just like its name, The muscle cleansing powder had the miraculous effect of cleansing one's meridians and marrow. The medicinal properties contained within could be integrated into one's meridians and bones, strengthening one's physique and increasing one's overall toughness. Many elixirs that were used to expand one's meridians would often use the muscle cleansing powder as the main ingredient. Of course, that effect could only be achieved after Xiao Yan refined it into an elixir. Before that, its effects were limited to repairing and increasing the toughness of one's meridians. However, with Xiao Yan's current situation, it was obviously impossible to refine it into an elixir. Therefore, he could only choose to directly swallow it and refine it. With no other choice, Xiao Yan did not hesitate at all. He opened his mouth and a suction force immediately gushed out. A large clump of powder was sucked into Xiao Yan's mouth. Immediately after, it was like a large clump of sand as Xiao Yan swallowed it with great difficulty. The instant the muscle cleansing powder entered Xiao Yan's body, the powder rapidly transformed into a strange yellow-brown energy. It began to flow in all directions within Xiao Yan's body. As the enormous energy continued to flow, it even affected the injuries in Xiao Yan's body that had yet to recover. This caused the latter's face to involuntarily twitch violently. Tightly clenching his teeth, Xiao Yan forcefully endured the waves of pain that were transmitted from his body. He began to mobilize the heavenly flame within the vortex, driving the milky white energy to the various meridians in his body. Only then did he use the heavenly flame to slowly refine it. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 9:14. Under Xiao Yan's slow refinement, the powder of the muscle washing powder actually started to burn within the heavenly flame. The impurities within it were continuously removed under the refinement of the heavenly flame, little by little turning into a milky white viscous liquid that covered the chi paths all over Xiao Yan's body. When the viscous liquid covered the chi paths, it was different from the heavenly flame. It actually emitted a temperature that Xiao Yan found unbearable. It was as if it was grilling Xiao Yan's entire body, causing the latter's face to involuntarily contort. His flushed red face appeared to be in quite a lot of pain. His teeth repeatedly emitted a chi-chi-chi-chi sound of grinding teeth, which sounded quite ear-piercing. However, as time slowly passed, the chi paths in Xiao Yan's body also slowly recovered under the medicinal strength of the viscous liquid. Not only did his chi paths completely recover, their toughness was even greater than before. In this way, regardless of whether it was for Xiao Yan's future battles or the mobilization of his dou qi, there was no doubt that it would be of great benefit. Indeed, it was bitter before sweet. If one did not experience pain and suffering, how could one possess strength that far exceeded that of an ordinary person? Every matter that Xiao Yan did seemed to repeatedly prove this principle. As for Xiao Yan himself, he was also repeatedly cleansed by this kind of pain time and time again. Only by experiencing the most bitter of hardships would one be able to rise above others. This was the unchanging way of the strong since ancient times. This process continued for a total of 2 days. During these 2 days, Xiao Yan continuously challenged the limits of his endurance, repeatedly swallowing and refining the muscle washing powder. In the blink of an eye, the originally huge rock pool actually gradually reached the bottom under Xiao Yan's crazy swallowing and refining. It could be said that it was shocking. After a long period of swallowing and refining, Xiao Yan seemed to have developed a certain level of resistance to the pain brought about by the muscle cleansing powder. Unknowingly, the power of the muscle cleansing powder seemed to have become less terrifying. Even Xiao Yan's originally flushed face gradually turned dull. Only when the last bit of muscle cleansing powder had been used up did Xiao Yan wake up from a dream. He didn't expect that the muscle cleansing powder had been used up by him. He had used up all the muscle cleansing powder that the fellow outside had stored up for God knows how many years. In the depths of the cave that was filled with fluorescent light, Xiao Yan curled his lips awkwardly. He didn't expect that the ending would turn out like this. After all, this was a place that had been painstakingly managed for who knows how many years. Now that he had turned it into such a state, even with Xiao Yan's thick skin, he couldn't help but feel slightly hot. Awkwardly rubbing his nose, Xiao Yan stood up and easily placed the huge rock back to its original position. Soon after, he walked out with a thick face. When he reached the entrance of the cave, Xiao Yan discovered that the middle-aged man was absent-mindedly sitting on the edge of the hole that he had created. His eyes were staring blankly at the empty space before him. Only when Xiao Yan arrived behind him did the latter suddenly wake up. His figure hurriedly retreated. After discovering that the person who had arrived was Xiao Yan, he hurriedly stopped his actions and bowed. "Sir, you're done?" Yes." His eyes flashed as he replied. Xiao Yan's heart was filled with awkwardness. Seeing that the man seemed to want to return to the cave, his face changed greatly as he hurriedly called out to him. Under the latter's pleasantly surprised gaze, Xiao Yan smiled and gifted him a few bottles of medicinal pills and medicinal ingredients that could increase his cultivation. After that, under the middle-aged man's gaze that was filled with gratitude, Xiao Yan quickly left the place as if he was fleeing. Seeing that Xiao Yan had left quickly, the middle-aged man heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was also filled with joy as he returned to the cave. He did not expect that in a short few days, he would actually be able to obtain so many good things. However, when he moved the huge rock away and discovered the empty stone pool below, the smile on his face gradually froze. In the distant mountain forest, Xiao Yan could clearly hear the mournful screams coming from behind him. However, just as Xiao Yan was about to speed up and leave this place, the bloodline power in his body suddenly trembled. Buzz! In an instant, Xiao Yan's entire body froze in the air. All the hair on his body stood up. An aura that made him feel incomparably dangerous was slowly flying over his head. Swoosh! Even though his heart felt incomparably terrified, Xiao Yan still forcefully endured the bloodline power that was about to erupt within his body. He lifted his head with great difficulty. Looking from a distance, there was an enormous shadow that blotted out the sun slowly flying over the 9 heavens. It was as though the sky had suddenly changed. At this moment, the entire mountain range that he was in had become dark. However, when Xiao Yan carefully saw the enormous figure that was flying in the 9 heavens, his body trembled intensely. His body was instantly covered by cold sweat. This is the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe. His heart trembled as he spat out these words. Immediately, the bloodline power within his body, which was being suppressed with all his might, actually struggled even more intensely. It had almost erupted. This bloodline power was the Dragon Phoenix bloodline that belonged to the Dragon tribe. Once the Dragon Phoenix bloodline erupted, Xiao Yan had difficulty imagining just what kind of consequences it would create. Moreover, it would have a great impact on him. While Xiao Yan was doing his best to suppress the Dragon Phoenix bloodline in his body in the mountain forest below, there were a couple of human figures seated on the back of the enormous bird beast in the sky. A golden-haired young man among them suddenly frowned. Just a moment ago, the bloodline power within his body seemed to have trembled slightly. That kind of trembling did not mean that it wanted to erupt. Instead, it was a strange feeling of being suppressed. What is it? Beside the golden-haired young man, a young and beautiful woman, who also had golden hair, seemed to have discovered the change in the young man's emotions. She smiled and asked, "Just now, I seem to have sensed another bloodline power." The golden-haired man spoke in a solemn tone. Hearing this, the woman smiled and said, "Don't forget, this is their territory. Don't forget, this is their territory now. It's normal for us to be able to sense the power of the bloodline. There's nothing to worry about." "I hope so. I hope that it is just my imagination." Hearing this, the golden-haired man frowned and pondered for a moment. Only then did he withdraw his thoughts. His gaze once again looked straight ahead. Under the slow flight of the enormous bird, they flew towards the depths of the western wasteland region. Only a long time after these people had completely left did Xiao Yan, who was in the mountain forest, finally recover from the frightening pressure earlier. His mouth panted intensely as he sat down on the ground. His entire body was exhausted as though it had lost all its strength. The shock in his heart did not disappear for a long time. Chapter 9:15. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yan was only left with 8 months from the 1-year deadline. 8 months was neither long nor short. In 8 months, nothing could be changed. At the same time, it was possible that everything could be overturned. The desolate desert was filled with mountains and rivers. Sand and rocks flew everywhere. The deeper one ventured into the western wastelands region, the less lush greenery one could see. The green mountains that one had seen earlier were no longer there. Even in the entire western wastelands region, such a scene was extremely rare. Strange rocks stood in great numbers within the desert, forming a huge stone forest. Although this place appeared to be desolate, due to the stone forest, it was able to withstand the evil aura within the wild wind. This caused this place to become a refuge for living creatures. At the same time, it was also a chaotic place that was filled with slaughter. At a certain spot within this stone forest, there was a relatively spacious open space. At a glance, there were a few huge magical beast corpses. Their blood had already dried up. Their huge bodies had swiftly dried up in this dry environment. The dense bloody aura that was emitted from them caused the other magical beasts within this stone forest to be terrified. Even some of the stronger magical beasts did not dare to approach this place. At this moment, a human figure wearing a black robe was seated in the middle of the open space. Beside him, a purple gold metal body was shockingly standing. The evil aura that spread out from it caused one to tremble in fear. On the ground, the seated human figure had both of his eyes tightly shut. His breathing was coordinated as both of his hands formed a training seal. His chi method was rapidly circulating within his body, wildly absorbing the mottled energy in the world. The mottled energy in the world gathered under the tearing of the strange suction force. It agglomerated into a huge energy vortex above the human figure's head. Like a storm, it poured an endless amount of natural energy into the body of the black-robed human figure. After being refined by the heavenly flame, it transformed into threads of pure energy liquid droplets. With a flash, they entered the vortex space. It was a long while later before Xiao Yan finally slowly exited his training mode. His eyes trembled slightly, revealing a pair of dark black bright eyes under them. Feeling that his body was once again filled with energy, Xiao Yan couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. He stood up and swept his gaze across the huge corpses in front of him. He shrugged his shoulders helplessly. These demonic beasts were not supposed to die at his hands, but they seemed to be dissatisfied with the visit of a stranger like Xiao Yan. They actually attacked Xiao Yan together, but they all died tragically under the iron fists of the North King. A group of initial class Do Di was nothing in front of the current Northern King's strength. They were basically all defeated with a single punch. This further proved the strength of the strong. An ordinary elite Do Di was just like a child in front of a high-class Do Di. This principle was even more so in the eyes of an even stronger expert. After stretching his body a little, Xiao Yan once again sat cross-legged. With a flip of his palm, a transparent crystal box appeared between Xiao Yan's hands. Inside the crystal box, there was a snow-white flower with a thumb-sized circle of light purple at its core, standing there leisurely. It was the Fusong flower. Looking at the Fusong flower in his arms, Xiao Yan's calm state of mind couldn't help but become nervous. A 6-petal Fusong flower. This was the first time Xiao Yan had seen such a strange situation. He had never heard of a 6-petal Fusong flower. If this thing in front of him was a mutated species and he swallowed it, it would bring great harm to Xiao Yan's body. In serious cases, it might even endanger his life. This was also the reason why its original owner didn't dare to swallow it and instead put it up for auction. There were countless living things on the continent, and there was no lack of mutated species. These things were often infected by external things, which caused them to change. Take Heimu for example. He was originally a great genius of the spirit ginseng tribe, but in the end, he became bloodthirsty after being infected by external things. His goal was to devour his own kind in order to pursue his own strength. This kind of mentality was simply crazy. Xiao Yan didn't want to become like that for any reason. It was because of this that Xiao Yan was unable to make a decision as he looked at the exquisite 6-petal flower in the crystal box at this moment. He clearly understood in his heart that every decision he made now was not only related to himself. Holding the crystal box in his arms, Xiao Yan temporarily descended into deep thought. His heart was hesitant. If he was able to successfully swallow and refine this Fusong flower, it would undoubtedly bring him endless benefits. By relying on the Fusong flower, Xiao Yan's spiritual strength would greatly soar. If nothing unexpected happened, it was extremely possible for him to reach the intermediate level of a rank 4 alchemist. At that time, if he were to meet the few 9-star Do Di from the Formation Master Association, Xiao Yan would not need to be afraid by relying on his various tactics. However, the problem that Xiao Yan was currently worried about was that if any unusual changes were to occur during the process of refining the Fusong flower, not only would he not be able to obtain any strength, it was extremely likely that he would lose his nature under the attack of the powerful spiritual strength of the Fusong flower. From then on, he would transform into a killing machine. In that case, everything that he had would vanish into thin air. If he succeeded, his spiritual strength would soar and his fighting strength would soar. He would be one step closer to being a true expert. However, if he failed, even if he did not die, Xiao Yan's heart would fall into darkness and he would no longer be a human. When Xiao Yan was lost in the chaotic darkness, who would rescue Sun Er? The person that Xiao Yan was most worried about was still Sun Er. Sun Er? Xiao Yan's mouth softly muttered. When he thought of the latter, his mood immediately became gloomy. The atmosphere in the space had become inexplicably oppressive. Xiao Yan's eyes were tightly shut. His originally rosy face gradually became flushed red. The emotions in his heart had also become completely gloomy. Within a short couple of breaths, Xiao Yan's sadness, anger, and hatred were like a volcano erupting angrily from the bottom of his heart. His body, which was seated cross-legged, began to tremble intensely at this moment. A wild killing intent surged out from his heart. The majestic energy within his body instantly spilled out uncontrollably. Bang! A frightening energy storm swept out in all directions with Xiao Yan at the center. In an instant, it shattered the large stone forest within 1,000 feet of Xiao Yan into a pile of rocks. The powerful energy continued to pour out. It was a long while later when Xiao Yan, whose body could not stop trembling, suddenly woke up. His tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. The wild killing intent that had gathered in the depths of his eyes also swiftly retreated like the tide. The frightening energy that was gushing out also instantly disappeared. Xiao Yan's forehead was once again covered with cold sweat. Both of his eyes were scarlet red and tears of anger were swirling in his eyes. His mouth continued to pant coarsely, as though he was enduring some kind of great pain. His appearance was quite shocking. Only after half an hour did Xiao Yan's trembling body gradually stabilize. The violent emotions in his heart slowly calmed down as if they had been vented. Xiao Yan's expression also returned to normal. However, there was an additional determined expression in his eyes. Sun Er, even if I really fall into the dark abyss, I will definitely bring you back. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 916. The moment these words sounded in Xiao Yan's heart, the crystal box in his chest burst apart with a bang at the same time. The fusong flower within it was exposed to the air. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Immediately, a gentle fragrance that was like a gentle breeze immediately pounced on his face. Although the fragrance was rich, it was not pungent. Instead, after Xiao Yan inhaled this fragrance, his mind immediately shook. The soul bead between his brows, which had not swelled for a long time, actually trembled gently at this moment. Feeling the throbbing of the soul bead, Xiao Yan's heart immediately surged with joy. Just from this point alone, this fusong flower did not seem to have any bad effects on the human body. Since he had already made up his mind, Xiao Yan did not hesitate any longer. He opened his mouth and a dense white flame immediately spat out, wrapping around the fusong flower in front of him. After which, it turned into a fist-sized flame-like cluster. After flashing slightly above Xiao Yan's head, it actually entered Xiao Yan's mind. Buzz, buzz, buzz. After entering Xiao Yan's mind, the flame-like cluster stopped a short distance away from the soul bead. Soon after, waves of enormous spiritual strength surged out from the fusong flower within the light cluster, forming many invisible energy streams. Under the encirclement of the heavenly flame, they were like small snakes that surrounded the fusong flower. Ha! Seeing this scene, Xiao Yan, who was observing the fusong flower, raised his eyebrows slightly. He could not help but feel surprised in his heart. The spiritual strength that surged out from the many spiritual streams was clearly extremely pure and enormous. Xiao Yan did not doubt that he could easily refine and absorb such a level of spiritual strength. The world was actually able to give birth to such pure spiritual strength. Everything that happened here was extremely shocking. The mystery of this world was really unpredictable. Not only was it able to give birth to thousands of mysterious creatures, but even this spiritual strength, which was impossible in the eyes of ordinary people, was actually able to give birth to such a pure and enormous spiritual strength. Perhaps only the soul origin that Xiao Yan had refined in the past could compare to the purity of the soul origin. Unfortunately, although it was pure, its gentleness was far inferior to the soul origin. Hence, Xiao Xian's remnant soul was unable to devour it. The soul pearl trembled slightly and spiritual strength was separated from it. It turned into Xiao Yan's figure by the side. Immediately, with a thought, the bone-chilling flame that surrounded the hibiscus flower quietly retreated, revealing the snow-white flower below. There were also a few substantial spiritual streams that circled around the hibiscus flower. The moment the bone-chilling fire dissipated, those spirit streams seemed to have broken free from their shackles. They carefully probed and gradually extended outwards, slowly drawing closer to the soul bead. As the stream of souls extended, Xiao Yan could clearly see that the faint layer of milky white light shining on the surface of the Fusong flower had actually dimmed slightly, as if the power within had been sucked away. Puff! The heavenly flame rose and completely wrapped around the soul bead. Xiao Yan's heart involuntarily became anxious when he saw the numerous tentacle-like spiritual streams approaching the soul bead. Both of his hands were slowly clenched. His mind controlled the bone-chilling flame, as he prepared himself to deal with any situation in the battleground. The moment those spirit streams made contact with the soul bead, an enormous and pure spiritual strength immediately poured into Xiao Yan's soul bead. Bang! In an instant, Xiao Yan sensed an extremely enormous spiritual strength suddenly surging from deep within his soul. It was just like a river entering the sea. The dark black spiritual bead suddenly trembled intensely. Soon after, an extremely powerful spiritual strength suddenly swept out from within the spiritual bead in an uncontrollable manner. In the outside world, Xiao Yan's seated body suddenly shook. An invisible energy fluctuation carried a frightening spatial ripple as it swept out in all directions from all directions. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, all the magical beasts within the stone forest where Xiao Yan was located were heavily pressed to the ground by this frightening spiritual pressure. It was as though they were carrying an enormous mountain on their backs. Their enormous bodies were deeply embedded into the ground and they were unable to move. Even the enormous Do-Chi energy within their bodies could not be mobilized even a little at this moment. A deep fear lingered within the hearts of all the magical beasts within the stone forest. Being able to reach this level, their intelligence was naturally not lower than a human. Hence, they immediately understood the origin of the spiritual pressure. Unfortunately, the only thing they could do now was to use all their strength to prevent their bodies from exploding and dying under this frightening spiritual pressure. Time passed bit by bit. The spiritual pressure that covered the sky above the stone forest gradually became increasingly powerful and frightening. Under this frightening pressure, the Do-Chi within the bodies of the few magical beasts that were closer to Xiao Yan were forcefully compressed, to the point that they were on the verge of exploding. Under Xiao Yan's frightening spiritual pressure, the Do-Chi within the bodies of these magical beasts was compressed to the extreme. The originally obedient Do-Chi had become violent at this moment. If it continued to be compressed in this manner, they would definitely explode and die. Mournful cries sounded within this vast stone forest. The frightening spiritual pressure that covered the sky continued to strengthen. At a certain moment, when the enormous spiritual pressure was about to crush these magical beasts, an unusual change occurred in Xiao Yan's mind deep within the stone forest. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The soul bead, which was continuously absorbing spiritual strength, suddenly emitted a sizzling sound. In an instant, Xiao Yan's expression changed drastically. A thought passed through his mind and the bone-chilling flame immediately revolved around it, wrapping the entire soul bead. At the same time, the spiritual stream that connected the soul bead and the hibiscus flower was also forcefully cut off by Xiao Yan at this moment. Damn it, there is indeed a problem. Xiao Yan's heart was greatly shaken. He focused his eyes and looked over. His heart suddenly trembled. An extremely bad premonition suddenly surged out from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, the surface of the soul bead, which was originally pitch black, had actually gradually become transparent. Through the outer layer of the soul bead, Xiao Yan could faintly see that in the depths of his soul bead, there was a flower bud that was like a stamen. It was a bud that was waiting to bloom. At the same time, Xiao Yan also clearly felt that within his soul bead, the enormous spiritual strength that he had just swallowed, had suddenly lost control over it. Moreover, what shocked Xiao Yan even more was that he realized that his spiritual origin was actually being rapidly swallowed by the flower bud. The hibiscus flower, which should have been swallowed by Xiao Yan, had actually started to swallow Xiao Yan's spiritual strength at this moment. It seemed that Xiao Yan was not the only one who wanted to swallow the hibiscus flower. The latter also seemed to have the same intention towards him. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 917. Deep within the stone forest, a black-robed Xiao Yan was seated with his legs crossed. Both of his eyes were tightly shut and his face was completely pale. From his tightly knitted eyebrows, one could tell that the latter was currently enduring an enormous pain. Within his mind, Xiao Yan was currently staring at the soul bead in front of him with a grave expression. His face was filled with a grave expression. The originally pitch-black soul bead was currently revealing a soft white color. However, that white color was not the color that a soul bead should have. Instead, it was being emitted from within the soul bead. The soft white light was as gentle as a pearl and did not cause one to feel the slightest bit of threat. In fact, one would even have the impulse to hold it in one's arms and admire it carefully. However, all of this was extremely frightening in Xiao Yan's eyes. Under this seemingly pure and soft white light, the flower bud that was rapidly taking root in the depths of Xiao Yan's soul had already begun to bloom at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, a huge suction force was released from the flower bud. It was like an invisible ghost hand that tore the enormous spiritual energy contained within the soul bead into itself. Hiss! The intense pain that was transmitted from the depths of his soul caused Xiao Yan to involuntarily grit his teeth and suck in a breath of cold air. The muscles all over his body instantly tensed up. His veins bulged and twisted as if they were about to jump out from under his skin. The pain that originated from the depths of his soul was something that Xiao Yan could not avoid. The spiritual source that was contained within the soul bead was currently being crazily bitten by the strange flower bud like a jackal. Even the spiritual shadow that Xiao Yan had formed outside the soul bead gradually dimmed. In the end, it could not be controlled and suddenly disappeared. Damn it! Don't tell me that I can only watch helplessly. A painful hiss was emitted from the bottom of Xiao Yan's heart. Xiao Yan was shocked to discover that as his spiritual source was being forcefully devoured by the strange flower, his bodily functions were rapidly decreasing. The rhythm of his breathing became slower and slower. The life that belonged to a living person was also rapidly dissipating. This body had already broken away from Xiao Yan's control and was just like a corpse. Xiao Yan's soul was also being rapidly devoured by the strange flower. Following the gradual weakening of his spiritual source, Xiao Yan's consciousness also became blurry. Once Xiao Yan's consciousness completely dissipated, he would officially be declared dead. Seeing that his spiritual source was about to be completely devoured, Xiao Yan did not have any means to stop all of this. The soul bead was where one's spirit resided. Do Qi was unable to enter it. If one were to forcefully barge in, not only would it be useless, but it would also cause irreparable damage to the essence of one's spirit. Hence, Xiao Yan needed to reconsider before the final moment arrived. At the same time, in the Array Formation Association of Jinyao City. Qin Yun, what is the meaning of this? In the large hall, Fan Siyuan and the other upper echelons of the Array Master Association were seated opposite Qin Yun. Fan Siyuan's gaze slowly swept across the 5 people standing behind Qin Yun. His expression was solemn. These 5 people were all genuine 9-star Do Di. Other than the 2 elite Do Di who had been guarding by Qin Yun's side that day, there were 2 more people. This was especially so when his gaze landed on the person behind Qin Yun, who was covered in a black robe and whose face could be vaguely seen wearing a mask. Fan Siyuan's heart sank. With just one glance, he could tell that this person's strength was above his. Haha, Chairman Fan, I wonder if you are interested in the matter I mentioned that day? Hearing this, Qin Yun smiled faintly. He raised the teacup with one hand and placed it by his mouth to take a sip. He glanced at Fan Siyuan and asked with a smile, "Are you talking about joining forces with you? Or should I say, joining us?" Just as Fan Siyuan finished speaking, Qin Yun unceremoniously opened his mouth. His words were filled with arrogance. "Dream on. How is it possible for my Formation Master Association to join you?" Hualai, who was beside Qi Ming, immediately let out a furious snort when he heard Qin Yun's words. He slammed his palm heavily on the table beside him. The frightening strength instantly shook the table until it burst apart. The few standing human figures behind Qin Yun immediately took half a step forward. A powerful aura suddenly swept out and instantly suppressed the fury in Hualai's heart. "Third brother." Fan Siyuan frowned and reprimanded in a deep voice. Fan Siyuan withdrew his gaze with a trembling face. "Young Master Qin, your Qin Wasteland Maze Valley has dominated the western region for many years. He is merely a 5-star Do Di. If you really wish to deal with him, wouldn't it be an easy task? Moreover, your father is..." "Chairman Fan, the reason I have come to look for you this time around is to ask you what you have thought about the matter that I have mentioned. If you are willing to join us, it will bring endless benefits to both of us. If you are unwilling, I will naturally not force you. Hence, I only wish to know the answer that I want to obtain." An obscure glint involuntarily flashed across Qin Yun's eyes when Fan Siyuan mentioned his father. Both of his eyes stared intently at Fan Siyuan. His gaze was like a torch, causing Fan Siyuan's heart to tremble slightly. Fan Siyuan and the others from the Formation Master Association became quiet after Qin Yun's word sounded. The three of them faced each other. Their gazes converged as they quietly deliberated in their hearts. Although Qin Yun's words appeared to be quite free and easy, it was clear that he did not come with good intentions based on the lineup today. However, Fan Siyuan still shook his head in the end. He raised his eyes to look at Qin Yun and spoke in a serious tone. From the old me's point of view, there is no need. Although that brat's fighting strength is extraordinary, our Formation Master Association is not a soft persimmon. With his strength alone, it is impossible for him to truly do anything to us. We are extremely grateful for young Master Qin's sincere invitation. However, I also believe that we have the ability to deal with him. Fan Siyuan's gaze involuntarily glanced at the black-robed person behind Qin Yun when he spoke these words. A solemn expression involuntarily flashed across his eyes. Hearing these words, Qin Yun's eyes slightly narrowed. An undetectable glint flashed across the depths of his eyes. Soon after he smiled slightly, put down the teacup in his hand and stood up. Since President Fan has said so, this young master shall not disturb you any further. I only hope that the Formation Master Association will be safe and sound. After speaking, Qin Yun did not hesitate any longer. His figure turned around, and with the 5 people behind him, he walked out of the large hall. Behind him, Fan Siyuan and the rest also welcomed him with smiles on their faces. After sending off the 6 people, Fan Siyuan's expression darkened. He turned his gaze and exchanged glances with Qi Ming, who was standing to the side. His brows were tightly knitted together as he faintly felt a sense of unease in his heart. Notify the entire city to seal off Jinyao City. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 9:18. As Xiao Yan's spiritual origin was gradually devoured, the snow-white flower bud within the soul bead had already completely bloomed. The snow-white flower had 5 petals, just like the Fusong flower that Xiao Yan knew of. Its size almost filled the entire interior of the soul bead. At this moment, the exterior of the soul bead looked like a thin layer of glass, as though it could shatter at any time. However, if one were to look carefully through the outer layer of the soul bead, one would be able to discover that on the 5 petals of this Fusong flower, between the tiny veins, there were numerous black lines that covered the 5 petals like a network. A faint fluorescent light slowly flowed from it. Finally, it transformed into threads of energy that surged out from the 5 petals. At the core of this hibiscus flower, a palm-sized black-colored bead was rotating. Around it, there was a small wave of strange black-colored energy that agglomerated into the shape of a serpent. It occupied this dark black bead and at the same time, emitted a ferocious suction force that tore off the little remaining energy on the black-colored bead a little at a time. Immediately, it was mercilessly swallowed by it. At the same time, the threads of energy that surged out from the 5 petals of the flower were also devoured. This black bead was naturally the remaining cluster of spiritual origin energy that Xiao Yan had at this moment. As for the serpent that was surrounding him, it was the main culprit that caused Xiao Yan to fall into such a state. More than half of Xiao Yan's spiritual origin had already been devoured by this strange thing. Even the remaining spiritual origin of the latter was about to be completely devoured. Moreover, it was not only Xiao Yan. Even the spiritual strength of the Fusong flower itself seemed to be continuously being devoured. From the looks of it, not only was Xiao Yan harmed, even the Fusong flower had been corroded by this strange serpent. It was not easy for such a dense black network to take root to such an extent. Clearly, this Fusong flower had been corroded by this serpent for a long time. However, from the looks of this Fusong flower, it did not seem to have been completely corroded. The spiritual strength within the Fusong flower was still extremely large. At the very least, before the Fusong flower was forced to invade Xiao Yan's soul bead, there was definitely more than 80% of the spiritual strength within it. However, after it entered Xiao Yan's soul bead, all of this changed. However, at this moment, Xiao Yan did not have the time to care about all of this. What he was worried about was that his spiritual strength could no longer hold on. If he did not take any action, it would not be long before the last trace of his spiritual origin would be completely devoured by this strange serpent. Ha! Bone-chilling flame. Refine it. Suddenly, Xiao Yan's roar came from the depths of his soul. Forcefully controlling the little spiritual strength that was left, Xiao Yan mobilized the heavenly flame in his body and rushed it to his mind. The ferocious flame enveloped the soul bead and a terrifyingly high temperature was suddenly released. He was actually planning to refine the soul bead. This was also the only way that Xiao Yan could think of to change the situation and save himself. More than half of his spiritual origin had been devoured by this strange serpent. The soul bead that originally belonged to Xiao Yan had also lost control of it. Now, in the soul bead, other than the little spiritual origin that Xiao Yan had, the rest of the spiritual strength was under the control of the serpent. This also meant that this soul bead did not belong to Xiao Yan at this moment. Since the soul bead did not belong to him for the time being, Xiao Yan naturally did not have any misgivings. As long as he was able to completely refine the enormous spiritual strength in the soul bead, Xiao Yan believed that not only would he be able to restore the soul bead, but his spiritual strength would also definitely be able to recover to its peak. It might even be able to rise to another level. As for the soul bead, as long as it was not destroyed by Do Qi, the high temperature of the heavenly flame could completely permeate it. While ensuring that he could refine the spiritual strength, he could also not destroy the soul bead. This was undoubtedly the result that Xiao Yan was most willing to see. Now, what Xiao Yan needed to do was to use the heavenly flame to refine this soul bead that almost did not belong to him. Even the fusang flower within it would be refined by Xiao Yan's heavenly flame. Previously, he did not have this process. Now, Xiao Yan had picked it up and returned all that he should have paid. The remaining was naturally what he could possess. Of course, this process would inevitably exhaust a portion of the spiritual strength in the soul bead. However, compared to being swallowed by this damn thing, Xiao Yan would undoubtedly choose the former. Moreover, the fusang flower was still present. As long as he was able to refine the fusang flower, Xiao Yan believed that he would similarly be able to advance to a rank 4 alchemist. However, before this, he was destined to experience some trouble. The raging flame wrapped around the soul bead and a frighteningly high temperature was released. The refining process had also officially begun at this moment. Indeed, at the moment when the bone-chilling flame released its high temperature, the soul bead in front of him suddenly trembled intensely. The approach of the heavenly flame seemed to have caused this strange spiritual strength to feel a threat that it should not have felt. Buzz, buzz, buzz. After a series of buzzing and trembling, boundless spiritual strength suddenly surged out from within the soul bead and rapidly condensed. It condensed into a seemingly solid defensive barrier outside the soul bead, wanting to use it to block the invasion of the heavenly flame. At the same time, the devouring power within the soul bead also became even more ferocious at this moment. The devouring of Xiao Yan's spiritual strength became even more ferocious. This thing seemed to be aware that Xiao Yan was controlling the heavenly flame, and wanted to increase its speed in wiping out Xiao Yan's consciousness. This caused Xiao Yan to feel a little surprised. However, the refining speed of the heavenly flame far exceeded the former. The instant the frighteningly high temperature came into contact with the defensive barrier, an intense chi-chi sound rang out from the defensive barrier. Under the refinement of the heavenly flame, the aura within the defensive barrier that was formed from spiritual strength rapidly dissipated. A few hours later, this defensive barrier was broken and the spiritual strength that it contained had all become Xiao Yan's nourishment. After absorbing this pure spiritual strength, Xiao Yan's weak spiritual strength within the soul bead was temporarily comforted. Seeing that his spiritual strength that was about to dissipate had become stronger under the injection of the spiritual strength, it also caused the devouring speed of the strange snake to slow down. At the same time, the bone-chilling flame outside the soul bead also began to emit an even hotter temperature towards the interior of the soul bead. Just as Xiao Yan had expected, the soul bead itself was not affected by temperature. Hence, after the flame penetrated the soul bead, it immediately began to refine the enormous spiritual strength that it contained. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 919. As time passed in the stone forest, Xiao Yan's refinement of the spiritual energy in the soul bead in his mind was gradually on the right track. In the depths of the soul bead, Xiao Yan's weak spiritual origin gradually became stronger under the continuous infusion of spiritual energy. The coiled serpent around his body was no longer peaceful. As if it had sensed the approaching threat, this strange thing became even more eager to devour Xiao Yan's spiritual origin. However, compared to the refining speed of the heavenly flame, this strange serpent was much slower. Xiao Yan was not anxious in this situation. No matter how much the serpent devoured, with a continuous infusion of spiritual energy, the power that he lost would be completely recovered in a very short period of time. In fact, under this cycle of devouring and refining, Xiaoyan unexpectedly discovered that the spiritual energy he obtained had become denser. At the same time, his control over every strand of his spiritual energy had become more precise. Just as Xiaoyan was still slowly refining the enormous spiritual energy in the soul bead, a huge storm was rapidly brewing in Jinyao City. Jinyao City. High up in the sky, a huge golden light barrier enveloped the entire city. In the city square, a huge energy light pillar shot up into the sky from the large underground hall. A huge amount of energy was continuously poured into the golden light barrier, protecting the entire Jinyao City. High up in the sky, Fan Siyuan and the other higher-ups of the Array Master Association stood there. Their gazes passed through the golden light barrier, and their expressions were extremely grave as they looked outside the city. There, a group of 6 people stood in the void, looking at the huge formation in front of them with different expressions. The appearance of this scene in the sky also caused a commotion in the city below. Numerous gazes swept back and forth, feeling extremely doubtful in their hearts. Other than that, their eyes involuntarily revealed a joyous expression. That appearance was as though they had seen their savior. For nearly half a month, Jinyao City was in a state of complete lockdown. No one was allowed to enter or leave. This made everyone in the city dissatisfied. They even joined forces to find the Array Master Association several times, hoping that they could open the formation. However, in the end, they returned helplessly. Just as they were hoping to seek Lu Zhongtian's help, they learned that the latter had already left with Wu Gang. Currently, other than the members of the Formation Master Association, the strongest person remaining in Jinyao City was only a 4-star Do Di. However, even with their strength, they were unable to leave this place. Thus, when they saw Qin Yun and the others outside the city, it was as if they had seen their saviors who could help them leave this place. Qin Yun, what are you trying to do? In the sky, Fan Siyuan's gaze pierced through the formation and focused on Qin Yun, who was among the 6 people, as he shouted angrily in a low voice. Just a moment ago, this group of people had used a violent method to forcefully break through their great city-protecting formation. If they had not used the spirit stones stored in the association to stabilize the formation, it was likely that this large formation that covered the entire Jinyao City would have already been broken. Haha, it seems that President Fan has a very deep grudge against us. We merely wanted to enter the city, but our path was blocked by your spirit formation. With no other choice, we attacked. However, from the looks of it, you don't seem to welcome our arrival. Outside the city, Qin Yun wore a cold smile as he spoke through the formation. I have already made the matter very clear the last time. My Formation Master Association has no intention of joining you. Please leave. Forgive me for not sending you off. Cuckoo, Chairman Fan, why are you in such a hurry to send us off? The purpose of our trip this time around is not to discuss the matter from the last time. Instead, we want to borrow something from you. Qin Yun coldly smiled as he glanced at the strange black figure wrapped in a black robe. His gaze looked at Fan Siyuan's group as he spoke with a deeper meaning. Borrow what? Fan Siyuan frowned and could not help but subconsciously ask in doubt. Among the 6 people, the figure wrapped in a black robe beside Qin Yun took a step forward at this moment. With a leap, his body floated forward like a ghost and quickly arrived in front of the large formation. Answer my question. Fan Siyuan frowned and cried out in a deep voice. The Do Qi in his body involuntarily began to circulate. Outside the city, the black-robed person stood in front of the formation. He raised his head slightly and revealed a strange mask that covered half of his face. Under the mask, a cold smile appeared on his shriveled old face. Immediately, he raised his hand and a dark glow flickered in his palm. He pressed it against the large formation in front of him. At the same time, a dry and ear-piercing voice was faintly emitted. Borrow my life. Buzz. Soon after, the large formation that covered the entire Jinyao City suddenly trembled intensely. A circle of strange dark black energy climbed onto the formation in front of them and swiftly spread in all directions. Wherever it passed, the light in the world was swallowed by this layer of strange energy. An enormous shadow swiftly covered the entire Jinyao City like a dark cloud. The weather changed and the sunlight disappeared. The world became dark. Even the shining golden light on the formation was mercilessly swallowed by the originally black energy. What is this? Countless people in the city revealed horrified expressions as they watched this scene. The expressions of Fan Siyuan and the rest were especially solemn. A moment ago, they were horrified to discover that even with their spiritual strength, they were unable to pass through that layer of strange black energy. Qin Yun, you want to kill us? Fan Siyuan cried out angrily. He believed that Qin Yun would definitely be able to hear his words. Haha, Fan Siyuan, I gave you a chance. However, you rejected it yourself. Since you don't obey me, I can only forcefully swallow you. Qin Yun's cold laughter resounded throughout the entire Jinyao city. It was not only in the sky. Even the ground below seemed to emit the latter's voice. That's strange, black energy not only swallowed the entire Jinyao city, it even swallowed the ground below the Jinyao city. Humph, if you want to swallow my Array Master Association, we will have to see if you have the ability to do so. Fan Siyuan cried out explosively. Immediately, hundreds of human figures rushed into the sky from the city below. Their bodies shook and the Do Chi within their bodies suddenly surged out, transforming into numerous energy light pillars that shot into the sky. Powerful Do Chi pressure swiftly filled the entire Jinyao city. Sharp gazes repeatedly swept over the city, hoping to use this opportunity to find Qin Yun and the rest. It was also at this moment that numerous human figures began to appear at the edge of the black energy that covered the entire city in a ghost-like manner. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded the entire city. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 920. An enormous city sat within the dark and mysterious space. The sky and ground were completely dark. A strange black energy wrapped around the entire city. Numerous human figures continued to rush out from the empty space. In the blink of an eye, they had already occupied the entire sky. Hundreds of human figures stood in the sky above Jinyao City. Powerful Do Chi pressure spread out and suppressed everyone within the city. Fan Siyuan and the other members of the Formation Master Association had grave expressions at a certain spot in the sky. Their gazes swept over those people one by one and their hearts swiftly sank. At this moment, these black-robed people who were repeatedly appearing were actually all elite Do D. Hundreds of elite Do D. This kind of lineup could be said to be a kind of suppression to them. It was a long while later that the unusual situation in the empty space gradually came to a stop. At this moment, the number of black-robed people who had appeared in the sky was nearly 500. 500 elite Do D. Even in the entire western region, it was likely that one would not be able to gather so many strong people. Qin Yun, what exactly are you trying to do? There is no enmity between us. Why are you doing this? Fan Siyuan's expression was extremely grave. The majestic Do Chi within his body wildly surged out of his body without leaving any leeway. His spiritual strength was manically maneuvered at this moment and agglomerated into an enormous formation in the sky around him. A golden light flickered and illuminated this dark space. At the same time, Qi Ming and Hualai beside him also poured their spiritual strength and Do Chi into this enormous formation. The three of them stood back to back and assumed a defensive posture. The members of the Formation Master Association around them also had grave expressions as they maneuvered the spiritual strength and Do Chi within their bodies and crazily poured them into the enormous formation under their feet. A powerful aura spread out from the array formation, and halos rose from the array formation, turning into light curtains that protected all the array formation masters in the array formation. With the protection of these light curtains, even a 9-star Do D would not be able to easily hurt them. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. The atmosphere appeared exceptionally pressuring. Needless to say, one would know that a big battle was swiftly brewing. After half a month of settling down, the storm had arrived. Only at this moment did the solemn crowd understand why Fan Siyuan and the others had sealed the entire Jinyao city. It turned out that half a month ago, they had already smelled the scent of danger. But what they couldn't figure out was why the Array Master Association didn't allow them to enter. Wasn't this intentionally keeping them here and forcing them to drag them down with them in order to help them get through this crisis? Thinking of this, quite a number of people in the city threw hateful gazes at the Formation Masters in the sky. Fan Siyuan felt helpless in the face of these gazes. How? After today's battle, it would be difficult for his Formation Master Association to gain a foothold. As he thought of this, Fan Siyuan's gaze involuntarily came into contact with Qi Ming and Hualai. In the instant that he did so, he could see the deep despair in the other party's eyes. It was very obvious that they were having the same thoughts as him at this moment. Why? Ha, it is naturally to obtain strength. At this moment, Qin Yun's arrogant laughter was transmitted from within the space. His voice was filled with arrogance and overbearingness. It was also filled with a rich, bloodthirsty and greedy feeling. Your Qin Wasteland Maze Valley is already the strongest faction in the western region. The training resources within the sect are innumerable. Why do you need to spend so much effort to deal with us? Aren't you afraid that you will die here today? There is no point in saying more. Attack! Qin Yun let out a cold cry. The hundreds of elite Do Di in the sky moved in unison. They charged downwards in an aggressive manner. Their target was not only the members of the Formation Master Association. It also included everyone in the city at this moment. In the blink of an eye, intense fighting sounds were transmitted from the city below. The fighting sounds were earth-shaking and were just like waves of thunder. Powerful Do-Chis came and went. They were so dense that they were like raindrops. An intense battle had completely begun at this moment. The 5 9-star Do Di in the sky had turned their gazes toward Fan Siyuan's group at this moment. Faced with a large formation under their feet, the strange masked black-robed person among the 5 once again stepped forward. He flipped his hand and the strange black-colored energy once again appeared in his palm. The expressions of Fan Siyuan's group in the formation suddenly changed when they saw the strange palm-sized black energy. They had already clearly experienced the strength of this strange thing earlier. Their formation had been broken after being completely wrapped by this black light. If this strange black-colored energy was allowed to wantonly spread, the large formation under their feet would once again disappear. Stop him. We must not allow the thing in his hand to touch the large formation. Fan Siyuan's mouth emitted an earth-shaking cry. At the same time, he hurriedly raised both of his hands. His 10 fingers moved and the large formation under his feet also underwent a change. The golden-colored large formation swiftly rotated while the seals in Fan Siyuan's hands changed. The enormous energy within it swiftly surged out from the bodies of everyone within the formation. It moved along the large formation and poured into Fan Siyuan's body. Fan Siyuan's aura immediately became stronger after receiving the pouring in of this enormous energy. Immediately, Fan Siyuan did not hesitate as he pointed his finger. His target was the black-robed person. Bang! An enormous Do Chi energy suddenly erupted from the tip of Fan Siyuan's finger the moment he pointed. It was just like a volcano erupting, transforming into an enormous energy light pillar that shot toward the black-robed person. The invisible space was easily shattered by the energy wherever it passed. Waves of buzzing sounds caused one's heart to tremble. Ha! However, just as the enormous energy light pillar was about to collide with the body of the black-robed person, the 4 9-star Do Di behind him suddenly stepped forward. Each of them unleashed a powerful Do Chi. The 4 of them worked together and agglomerated a solid energy barrier in the empty space in front of them, forcefully blocking the enormous Do Chi energy. Bang! An intense collision sound was emitted. The energy barrier and the enormous energy light pillar trembled intensely at this moment. An intense wave-like vibrating sound was emitted from the surrounding empty space. Powerful energy ripples continued to spread, shaking the heavens and the earth. Very quickly, the enormous energy light pillar exhausted all of its strength. At the same time it scattered, the energy barrier that the 4 9-star Do Di had created together also scattered, revealing the 4 people behind it. Soon after, the 2 enormous energies cancelled each other out. The black energy in the palm of the black-robed person had unknowingly landed on the large formation under the feet of the people from the Formation Master Association. Hum hum hum. Immediately, an intense vibration sounded from the enormous formation. Hearing this sound, the faces of Fan Siyuan and the others within the formation immediately revealed shocked expressions. Very quickly, the backlash caused by the destruction of the formation swiftly appeared on their faces. A corner of the formation had been swallowed by the strange black-colored energy. Without the support of this portion of energy, the entire formation lost its balance. The expressions of everyone within the formation instantly turned flushed red. Immediately, their faces turned pale. A mouthful of fresh blood was involuntarily spat out from their mouths. Fan Siyuan and the other 2 upper echelons of the Formation Master Association were still fine. However, the auras of the other members of the Formation Master Association who had formed the formation had become chaotic at this moment. Their blood was churning and they were temporarily unable to maneuver their Do Chi. This is bad. Retreat quickly. Seeing the unforeseen change in the situation, Fan Siyuan's expression changed drastically. As he cried out, he waved his hand and led the 2 people around him as they hurriedly charged forward. The large formation had been destroyed. Currently, these subordinates of his were completely exposed in front of the few people. Once something happened to these people, they would no longer have the ability to retaliate in this battle. The Formation Masters were their last remaining strength. With just the 3 of them, it was impossible for them to contend with the 5 people in front of them. If they wanted to deal with them, this group of Formation Masters would be an essential help. Even though the formation had been destroyed, one should not forget that there were still quite a number of formation discs in their storage rings. Other than the high-grade formation discs, most of the low-grade formation discs were activated by spirit stones. Hence, as long as they could protect these Formation Masters, they would still have the ability to retaliate. Even if they were to die in the end, they would definitely make these people in front of them pay the price. Just as the intense battle in this space continued to spread, in the outside world, in the sky above the mountain forest outside of Jinyao City, 2 human figures slowly flew over from the horizon. However, judging from their direction, it was obvious that Jinyao City was not their target. They were just passing by this place. As the 2 gradually flew closer, one could clearly see that the 2 of them, one old and one young, were standing side by side. Their target was the West. Everything that happened in Jinyao City did not seem to have affected these 2 people. Or rather, they did not discover the location of Jinyao City. This was because at this moment, there was a huge deep pit where Jinyao City was originally located. The size of the deep pit was the size of the entire Jinyao City. Jinyao City seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Other than the few sparse roads, it was impossible to tell that there was a bustling city here not long ago. From the appearance of this huge pit, rather than calling it a deep pit, it was more appropriate to call it a huge basin. With regards to this strange terrain, ordinary people would not find it strange. It was normal to see such a scene in the western region. The vast desert was unpredictable. Not to mention this huge deep pit. Even strange scenes were very common in the western region. However, just as the 2 of them were about to cross this place, the old man suddenly frowned with hesitation. He seemed to have felt something. It was an energy fluctuation that came from the void. "Wait." The old man called out to the young man beside him. The latter was slightly stunned and frowned as he looked at the old man. "What's wrong?" "There's something wrong. I seem to have sensed the aura of those fellows." The old man's voice had become slightly deep. From the old man's tone, the young man seemed to have thought of something. His eyes immediately hardened. His eyes swiftly swept over this place. A thought passed through his mind and a huge spiritual strength spread outwards, carefully probing this place. "It's useless. That aura doesn't belong to this land. It should be." The old man muttered to himself for a moment. His turbid eyes slowly moved. When he saw the huge pit, the expression in his eyes changed slightly. He raised his arm and extended a finger. He pointed at the huge pit. "There." As soon as the old man said that, the young man's gaze immediately followed the direction of the old man's finger. However, in the next moment, he could not help but frown slightly. Other than the huge pit in front of him, there seemed to be no other decorations. There was also no place to hide in the pit. Under the sunlight, everything could be seen clearly. There was not even a shadow to be seen. I've already said that the aura doesn't belong to this land. It's in the endless void. As the old man spoke, he extended his finger and simply moved it a couple of times in the void. His finger was like a brush and ink as it left behind numerous strange golden symbols in the void. This was actually a simple formation. The most shocking thing was that such a strange formation was actually so easy and casual in the hands of the old man. After the formation was completely formed, the invisible void slowly became distorted. Soon after, it turned into a dark darkness. It was like a huge square light screen that stopped in front of the 2 of them. The light screen was completely dark and nothing could be seen. However, light gradually agglomerated within the darkness and a group of scenes appeared. The first thing that was reflected in one's eyes was a huge city. Within it, there were countless numbers of people fighting intensely. The number of deaths and injuries were increasing at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, from the looks of the situation, it was clearly one-sided. Among them, a large group of black-robed fellows with strange masks on their faces held an absolute advantage. In the outside world, when the young man saw those people wearing black robes and the strange masks on their faces, his eyes immediately revealed a shocked expression. "Dodi? These people are all Dodi. How is this possible? When did they? Now is not the time to think about this. Their target. Those people, are they formation masters? They all possess powerful spiritual strength. The young man's heart was slightly startled. He seemed to already know the target of those people. Let's go. At this time, it is still not suitable for us to reveal ourselves. Once they know of our existence, it will not be good for us. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 921. 1 month later. Within the stone forest, Xiao Yan's body, which was standing still like a statue, finally trembled slightly. His joints emitted a stiff cracking sound. Soon after, both of his eyes slowly opened. The enormous spiritual strength within his mind had already been completely absorbed by Xiao Yan after a long refinement period of 1.5 months. Currently, the spiritual strength within the soul bead had already returned to Xiao Yan's body. Even the strange energy serpent had completely disappeared after being refined by the heavenly flame. The transparent soul bead once again turned into a dark black color. At a glance, it appeared steady and deep, as though it contained the entire universe. His entire body had basically returned to normal. 1.5 months did not bring any negative effects to Xiao Yan, who had been sitting cross-legged and training all year round. However, the only difference was that other than the 5-petaled hibiscus flower that had already been refined by Xiao Yan, the 6-petaled hibiscus flower was still standing steadily in his mind. With his current spiritual strength, Xiao Yan could clearly sense that this hibiscus flower contained an extremely frightening spiritual strength. The terror of this spiritual strength far exceeded that of the 5-petaled hibiscus flower. After resting for a moment, Xiao Yan once again focused his mind. His mind looked inside and looked at the 6-petaled hibiscus flower in his mind. However, his heart did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. With the previous example, the current Xiao Yan was extremely cautious about this thing. When the strange energy entered Xiao Yan's body, Xiao Yan did not sense it at all. Even during the process of refining the spiritual strength, Xiao Yan did not sense much of the energy within the hibiscus flower. Only when he refined the serpent did Xiao Yan discover that the latter was different. Perhaps it was because it had been absorbing the hibiscus flower spiritual strength all year round, but this thing actually had some intention of merging with the hibiscus flower. This time around, if it had not been separated from the hibiscus flower in order to absorb Xiao Yan's spiritual strength, it was likely that even if Xiao Yan was able to refine this spiritual strength, the strange energy serpent would definitely have completely transferred into Xiao Yan's body. In that case, once the latter merged with Xiao Yan's spiritual origin, even if Xiao Yan had a heavenly flame, it was likely that he would be unable to save the situation. Looking back, in Xiao Yan's mind, the 6-petaled hibiscus flower was still standing there. Looking at the hibiscus flower in front of him, Xiao Yan once again carefully examined the spiritual strength within his soul pearl. Compared to the past, it was undoubtedly much stronger. Now, his spiritual strength had officially entered rank 4, and he could be considered a true rank 4 alchemist. Although it was not as exaggerated as he had imagined, he was still a beginner rank 4 alchemist. Coupled with Xiao Yan's current age, he could already be considered one of the best among the younger generation of alchemists on the continent. Therefore, from the soaring degree of his spiritual strength, there was no need to doubt that Xiao Yan had already refined and swallowed a hibiscus flower. However, the thing that caused him to feel surprised in his heart was that there was another hibiscus flower in his mind. This meant that he had not only obtained 1 hibiscus flower, but 2. He had obtained 2 hibiscus flowers at the same time. This was just like a piece of jade. 1 piece of jade could bring about a fatal disaster, let alone 2 pieces. This was simply unimaginable. After hesitating for a long time, Xiao Yan finally made a decision. With a thought, the white flame rose again and wrapped around the 6-petaled hibiscus flower. Although there were many troubles, since he had already refined the strange dragon snake, Xiao Yan was naturally prepared in his heart if he encountered the previous incident again. If he could refine it, it would undoubtedly be for the best. However, even if he could not, Xiao Yan was confident that he could prevent it from hurting him. No matter which one it was, there was no harm to Xiao Yan. Since that was the case, why not be bold and give it a try? In the face of power, Xiao Yan's blood would never calm down. It was like boiling lava, rolling and boiling. However, this time around, under the burning of the heavenly flame, a scene that shocked Xiao Yan appeared in front of the latter's eyes. Under the crazy refinement of the bone-chilling flame, the 6-petaled flower actually did not have any reaction. The temperature of the heavenly flame was actually ignored by the hibiscus flower. Moreover, following the rise of the heavenly flame, Xiao Yan could clearly see a layer of substance-like cuticle gradually appear on the six-petal flower. It was just like a thin layer of jade that wrapped around the six petals. The roots turned into ashes in the flame. Some of the spiritual strength that it contained was also unceremoniously swallowed by Xiao Yan. Only the six petals did not change at all as they slowly floated within the heavenly flame. What is going on? Following the refinement of the heavenly flame, Xiao Yan was able to clearly sense the enormous spiritual strength contained within the six petals. However, no matter how he tried to absorb and refine it, he was unable to extract even the slightest bit of it. This kind of strange scene caused Xiao Yan to want to cry, but have no tears. Seeing such an enormous spiritual strength exist in front of his eyes, yet being unable to absorb and refine it, it was really like keeping one in suspense. If this were to continue, an ordinary person would definitely be forced to go crazy. However, just as Xiao Yan was anxiously thinking about how to extract the spiritual strength, he suddenly discovered that there was a faint suction force being emitted from the six petals. That kind of suction force was not strong, but it was attracting Xiao Yan's spiritual strength. Xiao Yan was unable to sense any enmity from such a gentle suction force. Instead, his spiritual strength involuntarily approached the six petals. When the two approached each other, the petals emitted a gentle glow. Soon after, Xiao Yan's spiritual strength involuntarily poured into them. Buzz! In the next instant, the six petals simultaneously flickered with a resplendent glow. The six petals rapidly rotated. Traces of a persevering expression surfaced on Xiao Yan's face. It looked as though he was in discomfort, but also as though he was gradually adapting to something. After the glow dimmed, the six petals seemed to be controlled and automatically flew around Xiao Yan's spiritual bead. The six petals surrounded the entire spiritual bead from six different directions. A gentle glow was emitted, forming a milky white energy barrier around it. From the looks of it, the six petals were actually protecting Xiao Yan's spiritual bead. A soft hum was emitted from the bottom of his heart. Xiao Yan's thoughts suddenly became chaotic. Soon after, an unknown energy appeared in his mind and connected with his spiritual strength. It was the six petals. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Yan involuntarily curled his lips with a strange expression. Just now, he seemed to have unwillingly left his spiritual imprint on the six petals. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 922. As he thought of this, Xiao Yan could not help but be stunned. A spiritual soul brand was something that one had to personally leave behind. Since when was it possible to use force? However, at this moment, Xiao Yan was not in the mood to care about all this. What he was curious about was that when the six petals left behind his spiritual soul brand, not only did they hand over control to him, they even brought some strange images into Xiao Yan's mind. Xiao Yan frowned as he carefully pondered over the images that had flashed past in his heart. Firstly, it was an enormous ancient tree. The size of the ancient tree was simply unimaginable. That kind of size made even a human feel as tiny as an ant under its feet. The ancient tree was so big that it reached from the dome to the underworld. Even the floating clouds in the sky could only accompany its ankles, however. It was just like this that above the ancient tree, in the even more distant horizon, an enormous distorted black shadow covered the entire world. Only within that narrow crack, one could barely see traces of sunlight that secretly seeped out. It was as though even the rising sun in the sky was afraid of something. The strangest thing was that one could actually clearly see the edges of that sunlight. Merely these were the only images. However, when Xiao Yan recalled this scene, his heart and even his soul could not help but tremble abruptly. That kind of vast world was something that he was currently unable to come into contact with. Even looking at it from afar was impossible. Just recalling that scene in his mind caused his heart to tremble. It was difficult to imagine just how terrifying it would be if such a scene was placed in front of him. Covering the sky and covering the sun. This was likely the only way to describe it. After recovering, Xiao Yan's deathly pale face gradually recovered. After which, a thought passed through his mind. His mind looked within itself and once again looked at the six petals that surrounded the soul bead. Xiao Yan was able to clearly feel the connection between himself and them. As long as he willed it, these six petals would move accordingly. This kind of control was complete. Of course, this was merely limited to the actions of these six petals. Xiao Yan was unable to devour the enormous spiritual strength contained within them. Otherwise, he was confident that he could use this to attack rank 5 alchemist. Of course, based on the current situation, Xiao Yan also knew that this was merely his imagination. However, being able to obtain such an outcome was already considered extremely lucky. Xiao Yan did not have any extravagant hopes of being able to devour the spiritual strength within these 6 petals. Everything was as bad as nothing. If he really devoured these spiritual strengths, it would instead bring trouble to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan was very clear about this logic. However, just as Xiao Yan was about to withdraw his mind, threads of spiritual strength suddenly gushed out from the 6 petals. They were like thin threads that were connected to Xiao Yan's soul bead. When he sensed this, Xiao Yan was slightly stunned in his heart. Soon after, he became serious. After all, he had experienced this previously. When he saw this scene again, Xiao Yan did not dare to be careless in his heart. After using both his spiritual strength and the heavenly flame to investigate, he finally confirmed that there was no mistake. These spiritual strengths did not bring any negative effects to him. Even under the refinement of the heavenly flame, the threads of spiritual strength did not undergo any changes. This also meant that the purity of these spiritual strengths had completely reached the level where they could be directly devoured. When Xiao Yan used the heavenly flame to refine them, he would only exhaust these spiritual strengths. With this thought in mind, Xiao Yan hurriedly withdrew the heavenly flame. At the same time, an indescribable feeling of excitement rose in his heart. Since these spiritual strengths were not harmful to him, this also meant that as long as he continued to absorb them, his soul would also be able to grow even if he did not deliberately cultivate his spiritual strength. Threads of spiritual strength were injected into the soul bead. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength also gradually grew under this extremely slow increase. According to the spiritual strength contained within these 6 petals, it was completely enough for Xiao Yan to absorb for a very long time. Even though this speed was extremely slow, to the point that it was undetectable, as the saying went, many little drops make an ocean. This continuous injection of spiritual strength would ultimately bring about endless benefits to Xiao Yan's body. In the long run, the benefits within would naturally manifest themselves. After a long while, Xiao Yan's stiff body finally crawled up from the ground. His body twisted slightly and immediately, the sound of bones colliding could be heard from all over his body. Feeling the surging aura in his body, Xiao Yan's heart moved. Do Qi swiftly surged and flowed into his meridians, spreading to his limbs and bones. A powerful energy immediately filled his entire body. After a long while, Xiao Yan finally lifted his head to look at the sky. After identifying the direction, he leaped and swiftly flew towards the west. Now, the matter of the Fusong flower had come to an end. Next, it was time for him to prepare for the promise of a year. At the same time in the Shilin region. Shilin mountain range. The hinterland. What did you say? Why would they come here? They have always viewed us as non-essential existences. Now they have actually come to look for us. Humph, what a joke. Lang Bingshuang's pretty face was icy cold. Other than Xiao Yan, she seemed to have never shown a good expression to anyone. If there was a difference, it would be an even deeper iciness or seriousness. As for her gentle smile, she had only shown it to Murong Qianqian. At this moment, a middle-aged man stood in front of Lang Bingshuang with a serious expression. He helplessly looked at Lang Bingshuang in front of him. Although he was aware of the latter's temper, this matter was of great importance and he had no choice but to speak again. Miss Lung, I know that you do not have a good impression of the clan. However, this time, they have personally come to invite you. They have even specially sent some representatives with high status in the clan. They have even specifically asked to see you. If you do not go now, won't you be slapping their faces? It is already good that I did not kill them. Is their face very precious? Lang Bingshuang's tone was indifferent. Usually, she could be a little more friendly to the person in front of her. However, the latter's motive for today's matter had caused her to be quite dissatisfied. But, go back. Directly tell them that I do not wish to see them, and it is best that they do not come to find me. Or else, I will not take into account any feelings of being from the same clan. When we treated them as our clan, they have never treated us as their own. Right now, they want us to go back? It is too late. After interrupting the middle-aged man, Lang Bingshuang waved her big sleeve. A wave of chilliness abruptly pounced towards the middle-aged man, and she had already disappeared. Go back and tell Murong soon that if he dares to agree, I will tear down his bird's nest. The cold shout was like thunder as it rang out in the ice-cold world. At the same time, the middle-aged man's body, enveloped by a cold wind, was sent out of Shilin region. Wonderful book house.